Everyone could see the strange expression on Shale's face. As time passed, the red ball of light that surrounded him dimmed, then darkened. Then the dark red color began to change to solid black. It must be the demon fruit. The demon fruit is working. Is Shale going to become deified right in front of us? Li Shuiqing merrily proclaimed. Liu Zhan was thrilled as well. Now I understand. Shale knew that the silkworm fights were going to start, but he decided to eat the demon fruit anyway. He hoped to use the pressure of a challenging silkworm fight to accelerate his growth and activate the dormant demon fruit power that resided in his body. During his fight with Han Sen, the demon fruit inside him has slowly been refined. Now, it must have all been absorbed. It will make him deified in the middle of this very fight. Shale is really leveling up to deified? There will be no more debating which of the two will emerge victorious now. It will be impossible for Han Sen to defeat a deified Shale. Li Shuiqing had been quivering with fear earlier, but now his quaking was due to unbridled glee. This silkworm fight had been a non-stop roller coaster of emotions for the two men. Li Shuiqing's emotions had gone up and down so much that he had thought his heart was going to leap out of his chest. The fires around Shale's body turned black. Black symbols were appearing across him, as if they were being carved into his exposed skin. A frightening presence was emanating from the symbols. Shale's power began to generate substance chains. Back to deified once more? Han Sen frowned. He wasn't blind. He could see that Shale's power was changing. Shale tipped his head back and roared to the sky, and the power of his substance chains exploded. His previously golden hair was suddenly dyed pitch black. Shale used to look like a gold lion. Now his body had shrunk, but his muscles looked more solid and powerful than ever. It was like every cell in his body had filled up with an unimaginably grand power. The new, black-haired Shale didn't look as wild. He looked mysterious and alien. The black symbols were visible all across his face, and black flames quivered across his body. He looked like some sort of demon lion from hell. He has returned to deified. Li Qir's face looked sickened. It didn't matter how talented or strong Han Sen was. He couldn't defeat a deified Shale. After all, deifieds were completely different from all other ranks beneath them. They were as different as the sky and the ground. Shale must have planned from the beginning to use this fight to become deified again. He wanted to use Han Sen as his whetstone, Exquisite said glumly, then sighed. She understood the truth behind it all now. That was excellent planning on Shale's part, Li Qir said with a grunt. He ate the demon fruit before the silkworm fight. If no one presented him with a serious challenge, he could secure first place. If he did find someone who could stand up to him, he could refine the demon fruit and return to being deified and still secure first place and all the spoils. He is a very smart man, I will confess. Exquisite shook her head. But again, it isn't that simple. A normal person would struggle to become deified again whether or not they refine the demon fruit. Shale was able to become deified because his talent was that exceptional. This may not have been his plan at all. No matter what his reasoning was, these are the results, Li Qir said in frustration. Chiyu Elder and Open Sky Elder both looked very ill. And the very high people who had placed big bets on Han Sen looked just as bad. They thought they had seen a sound hope of victory, but it was all gone now. Since the moment Shale became deified, their hopes and dreams were squashed. Their hearts fell to the bottom of the blackest abyss, and they couldn't see the light of hope anymore. I apologize. I tried to control my power, but I was unable to suppress it. I have now returned to deified class. Shale ceased attacking. He felt guilty about what had happened. What he said made everyone watching want to cough up blood. Many creatures wanted nothing more than to become deified, and Shale had been doing his best not to. That was quite upsetting. If anyone else had said this, they might have sounded cocky. But Shale was renowned for his honesty, and he certainly wasn't putting on an act. He had genuinely tried to suppress his power, but he ended up becoming deified anyway. He had wanted to finish this fight as a half-deified, but fighting Han Sen had required too much from him. He had no choice but to use his full power to fight, and so he was unable to hold back the energy of the refined demon fruit. Once that dam of power broke loose, he had become deified. There is no need to apologize. Your level is a part of your power. Han Sen didn't think it was shameful for someone to fight against an opponent of a lower level. If someone had a higher level, they must have earned it. Today's fight won't count. I will wait until you become deified, and then we will fight again, Shale said, looking at Han Sen. This fight isn't finished yet, Han Sen responded, his face unchanged. Shale shook his head. Although I don't want to win while you are at a lower level, I still need this first place. So, I'm sorry. We should abandon this battle for now. There is no need to apologize. Didn't I just say our fight hasn't ended yet? If you can win, then it was because you were better than me. But in order to decide that, we must first fight and see who the victor truly is. Han Sen gazed at Shale calmly. He didn't look very emotional. When Liu Jin heard Han Sen say this, he coldly laughed and said, "This Han Sen really doesn't know his place. Shale has given him plenty of opportunities to bow out gracefully, and he even offered to leave this place together. That meant he would give Han Sen second place. But still, the brat insists on fighting. If he gets kicked out right now, he definitely won't end up in second place either." Li Qier, Exquisite, and all the other very high thought Han Sen's response had been too cocky. He should have accepted second place instead of losing now. But in contrast to their own thoughts, Li Qier and Exquisite didn't detect any fear within Han's senator. Instead, they felt an overwhelming sensation of calm and confidence in him. There was no need to be angry. There was no need to hate. There was no need to blame fate or the people around him. This powerful, placid confidence was something only superior people could possess. But now Han Sen is a ridiculously dire situation. Why is he still this confident? Exquisite and Li Qier thought that Han Sen had no reason to be so self-assured, but his confidence was so strong that it affected them anyway. They began to feel like they should trust in Han Sen. "Come on, keep going. I will fight you. Whether I win or lose, I will walk out of here alone," Han Sen said calmly as he looked at Shale. "Yes, this is how it should be." Shale's eyes flared with excitement. He looked at Han Sen as if he was looking at his favorite piece of art. Perhaps Han Sen's power wasn't as strong as Shale's, but Shale wouldn't underestimate him. The substance chains around him exploded madly. He was like some leonine power of darkness that had crawled up from the depths. "Because of the respect I have for you, I will fight with all my power." Shale's voice was like thunder as he swung his fist at Han Sen. The fist leapt forward, and the shadow that trailed behind it looked like a raging lion. Han Sen didn't even have enough time to dodge. The scary lion shadow had already washed over him. Han Sen looked stable, though. Spell turned into armor to protect his body, and he used God's Wander to quickly flash away. He was attempting to evade the crazy shadow of Shale's punch. Bzzd. Suddenly, Han Sen felt as if the physical space around had been sealed. He couldn't rip space and teleport away as he wished to. He could only see the crazy lion shadow punch coming down on him. Han Sen frowned. He gathered up power in his fist to throw a punch back at the lion shadow punch. But Han Sen's punch went through the lion shadow punch. It was like the lion shadow punch really was just a shadow. When the lion shadow punch actually landed on Han Sen, it wasn't as hard as he expected it to be. The punch went into Han Sen's body and vanished. Boom. Han Sen's presence turned black, and his image warped until he started to look like Shale. His entire body was consumed by a black fire, and he looked identical to his opponent. Han Sen frowned. He realized that he hadn't been hurt, and his power had become the same element as Shale's. Aside from that, there had been no negative effect. No damage had been dealt to him, either. But as the black fire finished spreading over Han Sen, Shale said, "My demon lion power isn't destructive, but it will transform your body's element. I guess it is a demonic power. If you cannot hurt your opponent, then what is the point of your demonic power?" Han Sen asked. "Millions of different powers exist throughout creation. I cannot break down every single one, but no matter what power my opponent might have, I transform their element into my own. Since I am familiar with this sort of power, none will be able to beat me," Shale said. When Han Sen considered the ramifications of that, he realized how scary Shale's power truly was. At his current rank, Han Sen's power simply wasn't as great as Shale's. If Han Sen was able to depend on his various elements and his special skills, he still had a chance to defeat Shale. But now that his power had been converted into an element that Shale was already extremely proficient in wielding, Han Sen could no longer compete. Even if he was incredibly compatible with this new element, there was no way he would be as dexterous as Shale with its use. He wasn't going to be able to defeat Shale with the man's own power. Bring your enemy into the same harmony as your own, and then wipe your foe out with a symphony of destruction. Why does Shale's power suddenly seem to remind me of something? Han Sen thought to himself, but Shale wasn't going to give Han Sen much time to think things over. He swung another punch at him. With a sinking feeling, Han Sen began to understand just how debilitating the conversion of his power had been. He wasn't physically damaged, and with time, he could have gained enough understanding of this new element to use it in combat. However, a high-level opponent like Shale wouldn't give him enough time to adapt. Teleport. Keep teleporting. Han Sen began to depend solely on God's wonder to keep himself out of Shale's reach. He was unable to rally his defenses and fight back. Turning the tide of this battle was going to be difficult. Han Sen wasn't familiar with his new power at all. He had no idea what the power inside him could even do. He didn't know what its features were. No matter which Geno art Han Sen tried to use, he could only cast power in Shale's strange element. Han Sen is going to lose, it seems, Li Shuiqing said. His eyebrows painted him as a very happy man. Everyone now knew that Han Sen didn't have a chance. He was beneath Shale's level, and he was both weaker and slower than Shale. Now that his power element was the same as Shale's, under such extreme circumstances, how could anyone expect Han Sen to come out of this fight victorious? This would have been true of any person of Han Sen's level who found themselves confronted by a monster like Shale. Even if another deified creature went up against Shale, they wouldn't be able to defeat him if they were forced to use his element. Shale's demonic power was quite mysterious. Copying the powers of an opponent wasn't exactly rare, but his power was able to force his opponent to copy him. It was a little unfair, truth be told. Open Sky Elder had a wry smile. Chiyu Elder shook his head. There is a reason for Shale's fame. This is why he is called the best against those of the same level. Every power has an element it is weak to. No matter how unique an elite's power is, there is always some other power that will suppress it. But Shale's demonic lion power ignores that universal truth. His ability is scarier than anyone can imagine. Han Sen focused his entire mental power on developing familiarity with the power Shale wielded. But time was too short. He could have used this new power in basic combat applications, but fighting someone like Shale was next to impossible. Pang! Han Sen was too late teleporting away this time. Shale's punch struck his arm, and spell turned into armor to protect him. But even so, Shale's strike still almost shattered the bones in his arm. Han Sen could use God's wonder, but so could Shale. And Shale was quite skilled with the technique. Han Sen kept teleporting away, but he couldn't shake the opponent on his tail. As the fight progressed, he was incurring more and more wounds. Pang! Han Sen took a punch straight to the chest. His body shot away like a cannonball and slammed into the seal. The power that bound the arena trembled for a moment. Han Sen's body hit the ground, and he couldn't help but cough up a mouthful or two of blood. His chest felt like a cinder block had fallen on it. Han Sen knew the heat was likely just the blood inside his lungs. In fact, his lungs weren't the only part of him that was suffering. Han Sen's entire body was covered in injuries. Many parts of his spell armor had been cracked. The worst place just so happened to be his chest. The right side of his chest had been dented inwards. The spell armor was practically broken, and Han Sen's body was not doing well. One of his arms was just hanging loosely beside his body. It felt as if all the bones inside him were broken. He couldn't even move. One of his legs had been shattered, too. Han Sen could only kneel on the spot. Han Sen couldn't remember the last time he had been in such poor condition. Even when he was sucked dry by the shield of the Medusa's gaze, he hadn't been so grievously injured. But even so, Han Sen didn't feel like giving up. He was more excited than ever, actually. That excitement came from the spell armor. Although his armor appeared to be on the verge of falling to pieces, it suddenly seemed as if it was going to break through. The story of genes was the hardest Geno art to develop. Out of all the arts he was proficient with, under Shale's powerful suppression, it seemed as if it was going to combine all 9 tiers into one. He was going to become half-deified. Almost there. I only need a little bit more. Han Sen reviewed the sensations running through him in detail. He seemed to be on the cusp of breaking through, but it still felt as if he was missing something. It was like he was trying to scratch his feet through his socks, but he couldn't quite satisfy the itch. Let us end it here. Shale wasn't interested in continuing this fight any further than he had to. Even though he had admitted that Han Sen was a worthy opponent, Han Sen was just a 9th-tier king. Han Sen didn't have what it took to fight him. He was hoping for another fight when Han Sen became deified. Shale swung his fist again. The terrifying power of the blow was like a dark, roaring, demonic lion, which was headed straight for Han's senator, and Han Sen was still half kneeling on the ground. Shale's punch roared down toward him, but Han Sen didn't plan on trying to evade it. He used the left hand that he could still move, summoned power into his fist, and threw a punch. Why even bother? Losing is better than dying. The fox woman sighed mournfully from the distance as she watched. The seal was right behind Han's senator. He could teleport away before the punch came down on him, and it seemed like the only viable choice to ensure his own survival. But he didn't. Instead, he carried on fighting with his now broken body. But considering how injured and outmatched he was, it seemed unlikely that any strength he mustered would be enough to withstand a punch delivered by Shale. He doesn't know his place. Kill him. Liu Zhan clenched his fists into tight, white-knuckled balls. His eyes were red as he shouted spitefully at the video feed. Li Shuicheng was the same. This fight was about to end in exactly the way he had been hoping for all along. They were going to win the bet. There was no way that Han Sen could avoid the punch that was coming down on him, and there were only two possible results of trying to block that blow. He could either die or be disabled. Whichever actually happened, Han Sen couldn't reasonably carry on fighting. No one was going to stop Shale from reaching first place in the silkworm bout. Pang! Han Sen's fist struck that scary punch. The armor that protected his fists and his arms exploded, and Han Sen's entire body flew forward. As he sailed through the air, his spell armor shattered to pieces like a broken vase. Game over. Open Sky Elder was very sad to see this. He thought he had lost his Open Sky jewelry. Exquisite and Li Qier's faces changed. Han Sen's heart never gave up hope. He kept sending them the message that he could keep on going, no matter the odds. But his self-Geno armor was broken, and his body was severely injured. Hopefully, he would survive, but he couldn't keep on fighting. Now, they could only pray that Han Sen didn't succumb to the remaining force of the impact. Exquisite was tempted to leap onto the battlefield to save him from doom. Many of the very high people who had believed Han Sen was going to win were now all silent. Han Sen had tried his best, but there was too much of a gap between the powers of a king and a deified. Shale was too strong, and so they couldn't blame Han Sen for losing. However, their hearts bled when they thought about everything they had bet and were going to lose. Only Li Shuicheng and Liu Zhan were excited enough to start jumping around with glee. They almost hugged each other. After this fight, they'd reap a bounty of rewards. The resources they were about to receive might support them all the way up to the deified butterfly class. And on top of that, they'd also lay claim to priceless treasures of untold might. Pang! Han Sen's body slammed against the seal again. Liu Zhan and Li Shuicheng were ready to start clapping, but they suddenly froze in place. They weren't the only members of the audience who were staring in shock. Everyone was. After Han Sen's body hit the seal, he didn't fall to the ground. He just remained where he was. He was floating. That broken body of his was releasing a weird shockwave that they could barely detect. Then, his form became shrouded in bright light. But when they looked closer, they could see that it wasn't a bright light. It was a cloud of white powder-like dust, and the white powder was gathering around Han Sen's body. In the blink of an eye, a white set of armor had wrapped itself around Han Sen's body. The broken spell armor was back, and it looked as good as new. No, it was even more powerful than before it had been damaged. The symbol on the armor was shining brilliantly, releasing a scary presence. The holy light wrapped slowly around Han Sen's body. He was like some god spirit from a holy mountain. He is becoming half-deified. Exquisite and Li Qier were the first to react to this. They could feel that Han Sen's power was exploding in the breadth of its magnitude. In the middle of all that, he became half deified. This guy is too much. Many of the very high who were watching the fight looked absolutely stunned. It was possible to level up during a fight, but leveling up required a lot of power to support. In Shale's case, he had already taken in the demon fruit, and he was supremely powerful already. So, it made a certain amount of sense that he was able to break through during a fight and become deified. But Han Sen's body was entirely broken. His self-armor had been wrecked. In that injured state of his, it should have been impossible for him to level up. But Han Sen had become half-deified in that situation. It was a difficult thing to grasp. So what if he is half-deified? Half-deifieds are just another form of king class. He can't fight Shale, Li Shuiqing snarled, gnashing his teeth. He wasn't happy to see this. He only hoped Shale still had what it took to kill his opponent quickly. But Shale merely looked at Han Senator. He didn't attack him like Li Shuiqing wanted him to. You are a perplexing man. You became half-deified, even in the middle of all this, Shale said while looking at Han Sen. It was just a stroke of good luck, Han Sen said with a smile. Shale shook his head with a grave sense of gravitas. There is no such thing as luck in this universe. Luck is a rigged lottery. Any winner might think that they are lucky, but no matter how lucky they are, they wouldn't have one if they never bought the ticket. Han Sen didn't say anything. He really hadn't been depending on luck. Just before Shale's last punch, Han Sen had finally come to understand the key that would allow the 9 tiers of the story of genes to combine into one. He realized how to become half-deified. That was why he had taken that punch. That power was enough to make his spell armor break completely and then rebuild itself. But what a shame. If you were deified, we could really see which of us is better, Shale said with a look of regret. We can still find out, I think. Like I told you once before, our fight has not yet ended, Han Sen said expressionlessly. Shale shook his head and said nothing. He was happy to admit that Han Sen was strong, but half-deified was still king class. Han Sen wasn't as strong as him. He still didn't think Han Sen had enough power to challenge him. Brother Han, let us end this here. The Apollo set can be set aside for now. When you become deified, you can fight me for it. And if you win, you can take the Apollo set, Shale said after a brief moment of thought. A good opponent was like a fine wine. It needed time to truly reach its potential. Shale wanted Han Sen to become deified before he fought him again. But Han Sen didn't have the patience to wait that long. Seeing that Shale wasn't going to attack, Han Sen decided to stop talking. Instead, he lifted his hand like a knife, then used Fong to strike at Shale. Shale frowned. He had already decided to end the fight. He gathered up demonic powers again, and his fist became a demonic lion that went straight for Han Sen's body. Just like before, Shale's fist blurred forward, and Han Sen's power transformed into the demonic mirror of Shale's own abilities. It is the same. Does Han Sen not understand that if his power is forced to match Shale's, he can never beat him? Li Shuiqing trailed off halfway through his statement. The demonic power had definitely sunk into Han Sen's body, but the powers that Han Sen was using for his attacks were not demonic like before. The teeth knife he lashed out with was still a purple knife. It was not affected by the demonic power. The power of Han Sen's spell armor had been static for a long time. Earlier in the fight, it had been unable to block Shale's demonic attacks because the man had simply used too much force for it to repel. But now, the spell's 9 tiers had been combined and condensed into one. Its power solidified, and that new density allowed the armor to ignore the difference in power between the two fighters. Its energy could no longer be converted to the demonic element. Shale was a bit shocked by this twist. He used his demonic powers a few times more, but try as he might, he was unable to change Han Sen's element. He had realized that Han Sen had discovered a way to fight back against the demonic power he wielded. Han Sen is somehow holding off the demonic power. That is a bit unexpected, Open Sky Elder said with raised eyebrows. Although the demonic powers no longer change him, he is still a half-deified going up against a deified. There is a large gulf in power. It will still be an incredibly difficult fight for Han Sen if he seeks victory, Chiyu Elder said. Even so, as small as it may be, he stands a chance. Open Sky Elder put all his hopes on Han Sen's newfound opportunity. Although Shale's demonic power had lost much of its effectiveness, Han Sen was still suppressed by his opponent's might. There was still a staggering difference in their power levels, and Han Sen's Geno arts had only been reinforced to a half-deified level. It still wasn't going to be enough for Han Sen to fight a deified elite. Under constant pressure from Shale, Han Sen had to keep changing his movements. He teleported and dodged, keeping Shale from landing a fatal blow. Han Sen still didn't have enough power to engage Shale directly. Every move Shale made carried dangerous strength, but Han Sen was managing to keep him from hitting his target. Exquisite and Li Qier could feel the calmness in Han Sen's heart. Every time they saw Han Sen on the brink of death, he would surprise them and turn out no worse for wear. They were on the edge of their seats, and the rest of the audience was even more nervous. Han Sen was walking a tightrope. If he wasn't careful, he would fall into a bottomless abyss. Although his situation looked perilous in the extreme, Han Sen was holding on. Beneath Shale's oppression, he was able to avoid further injury. The cons of Shale being from a smaller race are finally coming to the surface. Li Chunqiu sighed in his heart. Shale was very talented, and he could challenge all sorts of Geno arts and perform miracles with his ordinary punching techniques. With his demonic powers, he could go against any deified elite at the same level. But now, his demonic powers weren't working. That meant the simplicity of his punching techniques might not cut it. No matter how good a driver someone might be, that skill would still only allow them to drive a car. Even the best driver in the world wouldn't suddenly develop the ability to fly planes. Shale's punching skills were so simple. He could only use ordinary methods as he tried to win this fight. He didn't have the power to simply end the fight in a moment. He definitely had an advantage, but he had been unable to take Han Sen down. If Shale could practice in outer sky for a few more years and learn many more top-class Geno arts, with his power and talent, he could definitely defeat Han Sen, Li Chunqiu thought to himself. He went on to think, this Han Sen is strong. Any ordinary half-deified would find themselves completely outmatched by Shale. They couldn't fight him. Within a repetition or two, Shale would analyze their skills and break them. But Han Sen's skills have been repeated many times, and yet Shale still cannot break them. Li Chunqiu could sense everything that Shale was feeling. Although the fight had changed dramatically, Shale was still determined to do his best to crush Han Sen. But Li Chunqiu could see that there were many moments Shale was certain he would get Han Sen, but each time, he failed to lay a finger on his opponent. Li Chunqiu began analyzing Shale's mind. He finally discovered why Shale was unable to break Han Sen's skills. Shale needed to see a Geno art to see through his opponent's flaws, and Han Sen's use of Geno arts was not flawless. There were too many flaws, to be exact. When Shale tried to make use of these flaws, he soon learned that the flaws were traps deliberately laid by Han Senator. They didn't do much harm to Han Sen's use of a skill, but they were enough to trap his enemy and provide Han Sen with some breathing room. Every technique had flaws. There was no such thing as an unbreakable Geno art, but Han Sen hid the true flaws of his skills within artificial flaws. For every real flaw, there were 9 ones to throw his enemy off course. He let Shale guess which flaw was the real one each time. But even after all this time, Shale had been unable to guess which flaw was the correct one. There are 50 paths to choose from, and there are 49 you can pick. Take away one, and it will become a fixed number and a variable. Imperfection is this world's true perfection. Han Sen has learned the meaning behind what it means to take away one. This guy is so scary. When he grows up, he might end up better than the kids of the very high. Open Sky Elder stared at the battle with wide eyes. I have heard his self-Geno arts have required a lot of resources. Even with 4 years in the very high, I don't know if he will make it to deified. Even if he does become a primitive deified, who in this universe could provide him with enough resources to keep him going beyond that? Chiyu Elder shook his head. He wasn't very hopeful of Han Sen's future. What a shame. If he was born as a very high, he might have been another Li Chunqiu. We would give him all the resources he required. He could have entered the Geno Hall for sure, Open Sky Elder said. Don't even think about it. You know Old Stubborn won't let an outsider become a true child of ours, Chiyu Elder said with a wry smile. Upon hearing that, Open Sky Elder sighed and said, sometimes, I envy Zhang Xiandao of the sky. At least he can do whatever he wants. We cannot do anything. Chiyu Elder's face changed. You can only say that here. Don't let Old Stubborn hear you say something like that. You know there are harsh feelings still lingering about the sky betraying our people. Open Sky Elder shook his head and said nothing. He continued to watch the fight between Han Sen and Shale unfold. Shale's punches were like demonic lions. Every punch looked as if it could swallow the sky and eat the sun. Han Sen was like a small boat surfing the crazy waves of the sky and the ground. But no matter how scary Shale's fists were, he was still unable to defeat Han Sen. A single kernel of corn on a big sea. Han Sen was that kernel, but he could float. It didn't matter how much the sky and earth raged. They couldn't take him down into the abyss. Now, Han Sen's mind was very clear. He used Under the Sky and God's Wander. He kept casting from his hands, one after the other. Every knife seemed as if it flipped the sky and the earth. He had practiced knives for so long. He had learned from the minds of many others, but now, it was Han Sen's own will and mind that Shale was putting under pressure. The sky and the ground are the chessboard. I am one of the chess pieces, but as they move across the sky and the earth, the meaning of the chess pieces is increased. There are 1,000 ways for them to be used, and you need a chess piece to follow a path. Without a chess piece, there is no path. Han Sen's heart suddenly opened up within him, and he spoke as if he was in a trance. Under the sky, I am the path. If I live, the path lives. If I die, then the path dies. Han Sen's voice wasn't very loud, but the very high and a few of the silkworms were focusing very carefully on this fight. They heard everything Han Sen said. You are crazy. That word suits you very well, Li Yuzhan coldly grunted. He had to be insane. And Li Yuzhan wasn't the only person thinking that. Even Open Sky Elder and the people who wanted Han Sen to win believed everything he had said was way too crazy. The path was the universe. The universe was the path. When they considered Han Sen's words, he seemed to be saying that his life was the sole reason for the universe to exist. If Han Sen died, the universe would die along with him. Across history, even the true God elites wouldn't have dared to say something like that. There were not many true God elites, but there were a few in every era. How many were currently alive was unknown, though. And even when they died, the universe never died along with them. And right now, Han Sen was someone who had just become half-deified. In truth, his words didn't even qualify as crazy. They were simply ignorant. But people misunderstood what Han Sen meant. The I he was referring to did not mean himself. He was referring to everything. Everyone was like a chess piece. They were controlled by the strings of fate. But without those chess pieces, the chessboard was meaningless. It didn't matter how good a chessboard was, it was a dead object. The chess pieces could lead to many events and combinations of moves, which was what led to a path. A chess piece led to a path and a road to traverse. Without a chess piece, there was no path. When Han Sen understood the meaning of this, happiness rolled through him. He was too happy, and it was that glee that prompted him to speak it out. People thought Han Sen was crazy and ignorant. Only Li Kier and Exquisite could understand the way Han Sen truly felt. Their pretty eyes fluttered strangely. Han Sen had gained understanding, which meant they understood as well. They were drowned in the will of Under the Sky. That will was so strong that they would only see something like this in a select few of the strongest very high currently living. But on this day, under the influence of that powerful will, they had learned something new. How could they not be surprised and happy? This understanding is already beyond what a normal deified could manage. Li Kier had a very complex look on her face. She was happy, but she also couldn't believe what she was witnessing. Han Sen was only a half-deified, and yet, he could understand the entirety of that will. Han Sen had self-learned all of this, and his under-the-sky knife skills were supremely strong now. Before, he only used knives. But now, the knives were infused with his own understanding and knowledge. It was like he had given life to a concept. Before, although Han Sen hadn't been injured by Shale, he had seemed to be on the brink of disaster. Han Sen had only been hanging on by a thread, and he could have been killed at any moment. But now, all of a sudden, things seemed different. Han Sen was still suppressed by Shale, but the audience sensed that he was more relaxed than ever. Even within this danger, he seemed to be oh so relaxed. He didn't feel nervous or crushed. Han Sen used his hands like they were knives. The knife skills he deployed had a solid feeling to them, and it made people feel as if he had set things up like this deliberately. But now, Han Sen could use his skills at will, with almost casual ease. It was like every attack was unleashed randomly, yet he continued to fight with the exact same precision, and sometimes even more. The sky and the ground are a chessboard, and I am the chess piece. Every breath and every sense are a path. Han Sen was totally drowned in the will of under the sky. As his knowledge of it deepened, his attacks seemed to become even more random. But at the same time, it seemed like the universe itself was guiding his movements. As attacks rained down on him, there was a sinking feeling in Shale's gut. Yes, he was feeling terrible. Although Han Sen wasn't putting him in any serious danger, Shale felt as if everything had gone horribly wrong. He couldn't tell what precisely had gone wrong, but everything about the fight now seemed off. The mountains were wrong. The rocks were wrong. Everything was wrong. It felt as if the world around him was now working against him, while Han Sen was moving smoothly between sky and earth. It was like everything was working to assist Han. Senator Shale didn't know what to do. Isn't this sky and min combined together a technique from the very high sense? Li Chunxiu and the others who studied the very high sense looked at Han Sen as if they were seeing a ghost, with their eyes wide open. By practicing the very high sense, one could practice sky and min combined together. By connecting the skill with the universe, the sky, and the ground, a practitioner could use it to borrow the power of the universe. But that power was only available to those who practiced the very high sense. Only they should have been able to do what Han Sen was doing. Exquisite could only barely scratch the surface of learning it. She wasn't fully proficient with sky and min combined together. Han Sen had never studied the very high sense, but the knife skills he got from the textless book had achieved the same effect as sky and min combined together. How could Li Chunxiu and the others not be shocked? Even those who practiced the very high sense found themselves shuddering. Despite his emotional detachment, Li Chunxiu was stunned. "This kid is so weird," Open Sky Elder mumbled. He and Chiyu Elder hadn't practiced the very high sense, but they were behaving as if they had never eaten pork and were now seeing a pig run. They had experienced a lot over their lives, and even if they hadn't practiced the very high sense personally, they knew a lot about it. Right now, Han Sen's knife skills resembled the very high sense and sky and min combined together. They were shocked, but Han Sen didn't think that much about it. He was submerged in the aura of his knife mind. In this universe, every blade of grass, block of wood, mountain, drop of water, and even specks of dust and bacteria, they all seemed to harness a meaning in his eyes. It was like it all had some kind of connection with his knife skills. Everything in this world is a chess piece. Every chess piece can be used in a certain way, and you combine all these pieces to compose a game of chess. The chess piece that isn't connected is actually connected. Every chess piece can affect the entirety of the game. And what I need to do is become a chess piece that can change the course of this game of chess. Han Sen kept trying to understand. I don't need a special power. I only need to use my power in a place that requires me the most. If I go swimming, I would be a fish. If I went into the sky, I would be a bird. I would go along with the universe, the sky, and the earth. And I will help the sky, the earth, and the universe. Han Sen's knife skills were becoming more and more unpredictable, and those random attacks were causing Shale a lot of trouble. The very high that had previously mocked Han Sen for being crazy and ignorant had now fallen silent. Han Sen should have been at an incredible disadvantage, but right now, he didn't seem to be struggling at all. Instead, Shale's attacks were the ones that seemed stiff. They didn't seem so smooth anymore. How very interesting. He's used under the sky to create sky and min combined together. Those very high elders are going to go crazy with jealousy. As Yu Shanshin watched Han Sen's remarkable knife skill, the corners of his mouth rose. His smile was strange and unreadable. At that moment, all anyone could see was the image of Han Sen thrusting a blade forward. Every object in the universe seemed to be releasing a knife light. They all followed the will of Han Sen's blade, pulling together into a barrage of knife lights that covered the sky and the ground. They were all coming together around Shale, who looked like a demonic lion. Not even an elite like Shale could block knife lights that appeared to have been generated by everything in the universe. The demonic lion surged toward Han Sen, determined to push through the tide of knife lights. He was breaking through the rush of attacks like a dam against a flood. Impossible! Shale cannot lose a fight like this. No, no, no. Liu Zhan and Li Shuicheng's jaws were clenched and their nostrils flared. And then, their mouths fell open. They were too stunned by the sight before them to even make a noise. In their hearts, however, torrential tears of sadness were coming down. But their inner cries wouldn't be able to save Shale. As the knife lights flooded into Shale, appearing relentlessly from the sky and ground, the demonic lion began to break. Shale's body couldn't take it anymore. The moment the demonic lion broke, the substance chains across Shale's body were shattered by the flood. The knife lights began to slash directly across his body, and his deified form was dealt a river of wounds. The knife lights were only half deified in level. 1 slash, 10 slashes, even 100 slashes wouldn't have been enough to damage the deified Shale. But these knife lights were beyond counting. Their numbers appeared infinite, and as they attacked in ceaseless succession, not even Shale's deified form was able to withstand the stream. Of course, this was all because of Shale's deified body wasn't strong enough. If he had achieved true invincibility, it wouldn't have mattered how many knife lights were thrown at him. Regrettably, his body wasn't that strong yet. Seeing Shale's body inside that flood of attacks, with blood flying everywhere, Liu Zhan and Li Shuicheng almost collapsed to the floor. Open Sky Elder and the others, however, were in sheer euphoria. Exquisite and Li Qier were immeasurably happy, too. They could feel Han Sen's knife mind with Under the Sky in operation. By watching this fight, they had been able to learn Under the Sky knife skills. Ultimately, that scary flood of knife lights hadn't come directly from the sky or the ground. Not even a little. It was all a knife light Han Sen had already cast. After it broke, it melted into the sky, the earth, everything there was. He used the powers of the sky and the earth to reconstitute that energy into knife lights. This was similar to knife silks, but even better. The sky and the ground themselves had become carriers for the knife lights. After the knife lights were generated, they appeared in every element imaginable. They had become far scarier than the pure knife silks that Han Sen had used for so long. The knife lights that broke and entered water, after they regenerated to become knife lights again, would carry the water element with them. When the knife lights melted into the soil of the mountains, after they generated again, they would carry the elements of the mountains. But Under the Sky still relied on Han Sen's own powers. It had taken a long time for Han Sen to accumulate enough power in his surroundings to pull off this attack. The more Han Sen used knife lights during a fight, the stronger the knife light flood would be when he finally activated it. That meant this skill required a lot of time to prepare. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to unleash such a vast amount of power. Under the Sky is decent. With this skill, Han Sen can fight others of the same level or a higher level. If he can repeat this whenever he wishes, he will be an unbreakable combatant. If he can last a long time, then when Under the Sky explodes, others of the same level would never be able to block this knife light torrent that is absolutely everywhere. It was unfortunate Shale ended up going against Han Sen, Li Qier concluded with a sigh. Looking at Shale, his body was out of his control. The endless flood of knife lights were tossing his body away like flotsam on the ocean. To beat Han Sen, he would have had to defeat him quickly. Han Sen's enemies will have to defeat or suppress him in a short amount of time, lest they end up losing, Exquisite said. His use of Under the Sky is excellent. It allowed him to completely dominate Shale, right at the end. It looks like I will have to focus on training Shale against this power. When they fight again, Han Sen will not be able to use Under the Sky knife anymore, Li Chunqiu coldly said. He didn't get emotional about Shale's failure. Instead, he analyzed precisely why Shale was losing and how he could further perfect Shale as a warrior. Han Sen slashed and then stopped. He didn't allow the flood of knife lights to rip Shale entirely to shreds. He raised his hands, and the knife lights everywhere shattered. They rose and disappeared. The valley was returned to the sound of silence. You win. Shale stood up. He could still fight, but he was now willing to concede to Han's senator after standing up He teleported to someplace beyond the seal. He knew Han Sen had dismissed the attack halfway instead of using its full power. If Shale had taken the full force of those knife lights, he would have been torn to pieces. So, continuing to struggle was pointless. Li Xuecheng and Li Yuzhan were kneeling on the ground. Their eyes were frozen, and they could scarcely believe the result. They couldn't accept it. What do we do? We have to pay back a huge debt and the open sky jewelry. The minds of the pair were struggling to work. Just one knife skill was enough to mimic sky and men combined together. This Han Sen is fantastic material. It is a shame he is just a silkworm and not a genuine heir of the very high. Open Sky Elder was delighted that he had won the bet, but he couldn't help but feel that Han Sen's low status was a terrible shame. After the fight with Shale, no other silkworm dared challenge Han's senator. They fought each other and eventually departed the valley. In the end, only Han Sen remained inside the seal. When all the others had left, the seal was lifted. At the same time, a square, bronze chest appeared. It descended from the sky, carried by warm light, to land beside Han Sen. Han Sen grabbed the bronze chest and opened it. Inside were the 7 pieces that comprised the Apollo set. Han Sen didn't bother pretending to be humble about all this. He put on the Apollo set immediately. There was a helmet, an upper chest piece, a lower torso piece, a pair of gauntlets, and a pair of battle boots. 7 deified treasures now clad his body. The chrome of the armor made Han Sen look like a mirror man. When Han Sen put on the last piece of the armor, a giant, silver pair of wings appeared on Han Sen's back. They really did make him look like Apollo, shining in the sky. Many of the silkworms looked at Han Sen with great envy, but Han Sen actually had the audacity to complain. What kind of crap is this Apollo set? It's like I'm wearing a light bulb. This makes me stick out like a sore thumb. I'll be brighter than the sun itself. The enemy will see me coming from tens of thousands of miles away. It's not like I'll be able to hide in the bushes when I'm wearing this thing. It's like a giant, bright, neon target. Although Han Sen was complaining, the Apollo set did exude a powerful aura. That made Han Sen very happy. His half-deified power wasn't enough to activate the full might of the Apollo set just yet, but it would still complement his current standing. It could already generate a few minor substance chains. And that was especially true of the Apollo wings that had appeared behind him. They gave Han Sen a speed that could rival a primitive deified. He might have even been a bit faster than Shale. Han Sen spread the Apollo wings, then teleported next to Li Qier and Exquisite. His speed was far greater than it had been before. This is similar to the power I gain when I use the Peacock Soul Robe. The Apollo wings don't give me as much speed as the Peacock Soul Robe, but the power of the Apollo set isn't fully activated yet. Once it is used to its full potential, I might be able to fight larva deifieds like Menglai. Han Sen admired his Apollo set. He really loved it. The smoke and the fog were as heavy as rain. There was a garden that housed a lake, and Li Qier and Exquisite were sitting at a stone table nearby. They appear to be in a state of confusion. Have you thought about Under the Sky's flaws? Exquisite asked, glancing at Li Qier. Li Qier shook her head. What about you? Exquisite shook her head as well. She frowned and said, for us, silkworms are a way of gaining new understanding. However, they aren't merely tools for learning. Our situation now is both good and bad. On the positive side, we're learning a lot from Han Sen, and he's allowed us to feel what having a truly powerful will is like. He will help us accelerate our growth. But if we keep learning and following him, we will simply be copying his progress. We will be aping him, so to speak. And no matter how closely we try to replicate what he has done, we will never achieve what the true Han Sen can accomplish. The path we tread must be one that leads to glory greater than our silkworms. We need to trailblaze a path of our own. But with the way things are now, that might be a very difficult prospect. Li Qier cut in quickly. Perhaps, but Han Sen's will is too strong. At our level, we won't be able to pinpoint his flaws for our own betterment. The fact that we can confess something like that is terrible, without a doubt. He is supposed to be our silkworm. We are not supposed to be his. If Han Sen leaves the impression that we cannot exceed his talents, then we are already limited by him, Exquisite said with a look of seriousness. In that case, what do you propose we do about it? Li Qier couldn't think of a way around this problem. If Han Sen left an indelible impression of invincibility on their peers, then their achievements would be forever overshadowed by his own. That wasn't the sort of silkworm they were looking for. Han Sen needs to lose once. A loss is the only way that impression of him can be erased from our hearts, Exquisite said. Even Shale lost to him. I highly doubt that any other silkworm will come close to rivaling him in the near future. Likir looked at Exquisite with confusion. She wasn't entirely sure what her third sister was implying. Why do you suggest it has to be a silkworm? Now that Han Sen has achieved first place, he should be able to go to Jail Demon Hall. He can start practicing there. First, it will be a great help for his own abilities. Secondly, he will probably get crushed. Once that happens, he will lose his confidence and cockiness. Thirdly, it will break the image we have of him. We'll have a hard time viewing him as being so incredible if he gets defeated. That sounds like 3 birds with 1 stone, if you ask me, Exquisite said coldly. This is a brilliant idea. Now, let us go and register his application to enter Jail Demon Hall. Open Sky Elder earned a lot from Han Sen, so I doubt he will refuse his request to go there, Likir replied merrily. Han Sen and Bauer were still fishing at Underworld Lake. Likir gave an Underworld silk to Bauer, so Han Sen no longer had to share his own. But Han Sen was still feeling quite depressed. After he fished up the Xian Yellow Sutra, the only things he had pulled from the lake were utter trash. Rusted armor and broken weapons were a frequent sight. He had even collected bits of broken statues and the like. One time had been particularly bad. While he was fishing, he latched onto something super heavy. He had instantly assumed, based on the weight, that he had snagged something amazing. He spent half the day reeling it in. When he finally pulled it free of the lake, it was just a 3-meter-tall statue with shoulders and legs missing. Han Sen's lungs almost exploded. Bauer was sometimes able to fish up pieces of jewelry. Han Sen didn't know what they were for. And also, the entire time, the 16 pigs continued to follow Bauer around. They frequently munched on Bauer's snacks, but they didn't grow at all. They each remained the size of a fist. They looked small and cute, but as far as Han Sen could tell, they were completely useless. If they were not spending their days eating and sleeping, they were sleeping and eating. It was either that or following Bauer's *SS and running around everywhere. Dad, come here. There is something coming. It is so heavy, Bauer suddenly exclaimed. Han Sen quickly approached her, and he started tugging the string. It really did feel like something absurdly heavy. It was like the other end of the string was attached to a small mountain. Han Sen and Bauer used all their strength as they tried to reel in the underworld silk from the lake. After pulling it for a while, they finally saw something coming up from below the swirling clouds. They could see its corner as it rose from the mist. What is this thing? Han Sen looked shocked when he saw the item. Based on what he could see, Han Sen could tell that the item was built from bronze. It had an opening that was 1 meter wide at the top and narrowed as it went farther down. As the bronze item was slowly pulled up, more and more of it appeared above the fog. Han Sen could soon see that this bronze item's opening was 1 meter in size. It was a statue of a sheep's head. No, not a single sheep's head. Each of the object's 4 corners held a sheep's head. This thing. It looks like a 4-sheep cube, Han Sen thought to himself when the bronze item finally slid into full view. Pang! It sounded as if something had broken. Although the bronze item had almost completely been removed from the lake, its ascension came to a halt. The underworld silk holding the statue had snapped. Han Sen watched the 4-sheep cube sink back into the mist of the lake. He didn't know if it was an illusion or not, but Han Sen could see the 4 sheep heads seemed to smile strangely at him as the object disappeared. Han Sen stared at the lake in confusion. The underworld silk had broken with ease, which was a first. Han Sen and Bauer had spent a long time fishing with underworld silks, and never before had this happened. Now, the underworld silk had simply snapped without them understanding why. He wanted to ask Likir and Exquisite, but they weren't present. Han Sen had nothing else to do except continue his mellow fishing experience. It has been a few days. Mr. White should have some news for me. I should ask Likir to take me to the desert again, Han Sen said to himself as he continued fishing. He had a simmering sense of excitement regarding the Xian Yellow Sutra. Han Sen wouldn't even have to practice the strange Geno art. He only had to reverse his blood pull sutra to make use of it. How lucky was he to stumble on such an easy new Geno art. I hope the Shin Yellow Sutra is useful, Han Sen thought to himself. But then he suddenly heard Bauer shouting, "Dad, something is coming. Come and help me." Han Sen saw Bauer's small hand clutching the underworld silk. She seemed to be struggling. The underworld silk had latched onto something heavy that kept the line taut, just like earlier. Han Sen raced over to her and grabbed hold of Bauer's underworld silk to pull the next item up. Whatever he was bringing up now was heavier than the 4-sheep cube. Han Sen and Bauer fought against that immense weight. There was a power that was pulling downward, struggling against them. They were on the verge of losing the underworld silk or getting pulled into the lake themselves. The 16 little piggies came over, too. They all stood in a line to bite the underworld silk. Then they leaned back, pulling it like a big game of tug-o-war. Put your back into it, comrades. 1, 2, 1, 2. 2 people and 16 small piglets were pulling the silk. They all shouted. After half a day, they finally saw something emerge from the lake. When they finally saw it, Han Sen couldn't help but shout, "It is the 4-sheep cube again. We managed to fish it up again." Han Sen was shocked. He thought about the 4-sheep cube that plummeted back down with the 4 eerie faces smiling at him. He looked closely at the heads of the sheep. He jerked back in surprise. The bronze sheep had their eyebrows lowered, and their eyes were half closed. They looked like monks that were meditating. They were no longer smiling as they were earlier. Are the expressions on the 4 sheep heads different? Han Sen wondered to himself. Then, he heard a pang. The underworld silk snapped again. Han Sen watched the 4-sheep cube quickly sink again. This time, he could see the bronze sheep heads clearly. Their meditative expression was gone now. The sheep smiled creepily. It looked as if they were squinting their eyes to look at them. Is that thing alive? Han Sen wondered curiously. But before he could examine it any further, the 4-sheep cube was lost in the lake once more. Now this is weird. Why have we fished up the same thing twice in a row? And why does that thing seem as if it is alive? Do living creatures actually exist in the anti-material world? Han Sen pondered. He didn't know much about Underworld Lake, and he would have to wait for Likir and Exquisite to return so he could ask them. Many more occurrences followed that one, though. Bauer managed to fish up that 4-sheep cube a number of times. She could never pull it all the way up, though. The object would always detach and fall back into the lake. As for Han Sen, he only ever managed to fish up useless garbage. The triangular symbol on the small jade figure lit up. Han Sen knew Likir and Exquisite were on their way back. Not long later, he saw them appear via teleport on the shores of the lake. Han Sen, I understand you are always keen to hunt xenogeneics, yes? We have found a suitable location for you. There are primitive deified xenogeneics to kill, and it is safe. You will have the chance to take down a primitive deified xenogeneic solo, Likir said with a smile. There's such a good hunting ground out here. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Han Sen asked, looking at Likir with suspicion. Before the silkworm bouts, there were places that you weren't qualified to enter. Now that you've earned first place among the silkworms, though, things are different, Likir explained. I see. Han Sen's mind wandered back to the 4-sheep cube, so he told them about his experience trying to fish it out of the lake a few times. When they heard the story, Likir and Exquisite's faces both went gray. Exquisite looked at Han Sen and asked, the 4-sheep cube you fished up, would you say it was 3 or 4 meters tall? Exquisite described the 4-sheep cube she was thinking of, and it turned out to be the exact same one Han Sen had seen. Yes, that is the one. Is there a problem with it? Han Sen asked, glancing at the 2 women's expressions. He knew there was something dodgy about this. Likir and Exquisite looked at each other. Exquisite said, this 4-sheep cube is something the very high have fished up before. After saying that, Exquisite stopped. And then? Han Sen asked, let me explain. Likir looked at Han Sen with a strange face and said, our people have fished up the 4-sheep cube before. But that thing is not an omen of good luck. All the very high who fished up the 4-sheep cube ended up having misfortune fall upon them. Han Sen's heart jumped. He frowned and asked, what happened to them? Were they injured, or did they just end up dead? Likir shook her head. They were neither hurt nor killed. According to the histories of the Very High, there were 3 Very High that fished up the 4-sheep cube. One of them was the one who made the sky and sky palace. Isn't that a good thing? Why would you consider that unlucky? Han Sen didn't understand what she was trying to say. Building a race and becoming supremely powerful was something glorious. Why would they consider that a misfortune? Well, with a wry smile, Li Qiu went on to say, the second Very High that fished up the 4-sheep cube had something happen to him. It made him kill his parents. And then, he betrayed the Very High. After pausing, Li Qiu said, the third one that fished up the 4-sheep cube ended up stealing an important treasure from the Very High. Then, he disappeared. Where he went, no one knows. So whoever fishes up the 4-sheep cube is from the Very High, and they have all betrayed the Very High. Now Han Sen understood why the 4-sheep cube might have been deemed unlucky. Although there is no proof, there are records that confirm that the 4-sheep cube was connected to all 3. Exquisite had a wry smile. Han Sen coughed awkwardly. I'm not from the Very High. I will leave one day. That doesn't mean I will betray you one day, does it? Exquisite went very quiet, then said, the 3 Very High that I talked about only fished the 4-sheep cube once. They never saw it before or after that one time. But you seem to have fished it up 6 times. Although the whole betrayal thing is just a guess, this item is considered taboo for our race. You and Bauer should never again mention the fact that you fished up the 4-sheep cube. It is best not to stir up any trouble.
Han Sen nodded.
He had originally thought it might be a useful item, but he'd had no clue it was actually so profoundly unlucky. He wasn't going to mention what he fished up to anyone else. That being said, he didn't know many people in the Very High. Even if he wanted to tell someone else, there was no one he could tell. Let's go. You two shouldn't visit Underworld Lake for a while, Exquisite said to them. Then, she teleported Han Sen and Bauer away from the lake. Han Sen asked Li Qiu about the place they were headed, a location known as Jail Demon Hall, and what sort of xenogeniacs he would be able to kill. He learned that the place used to be a mere cave, but the Very High built a palace atop it. Calling the structure a palace was a bit misleading, though. In actuality, it was more like a prison. A xenogeniac had lived in the cave beneath Jail Demon Hall for a long time. The creature lacked the power to escape its prison, but after a while, it learned how to create a doppelganger that could enter the palace above the cave. The doppelganger was a primitive deified. Now, every so often, the Very High had to go to Jail Demon Hall and kill the doppelganger to make sure that the xenogenic stayed contained. Li Qiu and Exquisite had already filled out the paperwork that would allow them to hunt in Jail Demon Hall. Now that his request had been granted, Han Sen would be given the chance to solo a deified xenogeniac. A primitive class deified xenogeniac? Huh? I can test the strength of my Apollo set this way, and earn a deified xenogeniac gene as well. That is 2 birds with 1 stone, Han Sen thought happily. The Peacock King Beast Robe and the 6-core Snake Bow were items Han Sen didn't dare use while Li Qiu or Exquisite were around. He didn't want them to realize that beast souls and treasures were different. His new Apollo set would do a great deal to help Han Sen keep his secrets. The 4 of them went to Jail Demon Hall. There, Li Qiu pulled Bauer to the side so that Han Sen could enter Jail Demon Hall alone. The rest of them would wait outside. Han Sen wasn't suspicious. He thought they just wanted to get more of his battle experience and knowledge, and that was why they had asked him to go and kill the doppelganger xenogeniac. He pushed the door open and entered Jail Demon Hall. Jail Demon Hall had been built for that xenogeniac. When Han Sen entered it, he couldn't feel the restrictive effects. The hall's architecture was incredibly strange. The floors of an ordinary hall were usually flat or subtly sloped as they led up toward a stage. Inside this hall, however, all 4 sides of the hall led down a series of broad steps to a 10-meter-long stone platform at the bottom. The stone platform was covered in symbols that Han Sen had never seen before. Although he had no clue what they meant, he could sense a strange power coming from the runes. An ink-black stone pillar sat in the center of the stone platform, and it ran all the way up to connect with the hall's ceiling. The upper portion of the pillar was covered in engravings and markings, but Han Sen's attention was instantly drawn to the pillar's base and to the creature that had been bound there. That creature looked vaguely humanoid, but the body was insectal. Its shell was blood red, and a red horn rose from its head, making it look something like a unicorn. Its eyes also flashed with a bloody, crimson color. It was full of rage and murderous desires. While Han Sen observed that trapped creature, the creature stared up at Han Sen, too. It suddenly opened its mouth and revealed the jagged, saw-like teeth that adorned its maw. It let out a high-pitched scream at Han Sen. It began to thrash around violently, and when it moved, the markings across the stone pillar lit up. The chains attached to the pillar also began to glow. They tightened their grip on the creature, making it harder for the furious being to escape from the stone pillar. It really is a primitive deified. Upon seeing the red substance chains appearing around the creature, a delighted expression crossed Han Sen's face. Outer Sky had many xenogeneics, but most of them were very frightening. It would have been too risky for Han Sen to go out and pick a fight with some random xenogeneic. Now, a primitive deified xenogeneic had been handed to Han Sen on a platter. Han Sen was extremely pleased with the way this was turning out. Han Sen donned his Apollo set, and then, the Apollo wings fluttered slightly. They sent him zipping toward the stone platform in an instant. He turned his hand into a knife and slashed at the xenogeneic bound to the stone pillar. Han Sen was still using Under the Sky, but with the extra strength that the Apollo set was giving him, a frightening substance chain knife air was unleashed as he activated the skill. His attack was like a sunlight blade as it came down against the xenogeneic's neck. The xenogeneic hissed like a viper, and its red substance chains exploded like a volcano. It broke free of the restraints of the stone pillar, and its talons flashed toward Han Sen like red blades. Catcha! Han Sen's knife air was as strong as the strike of an ordinary primitive deified, but against that xenogeneic's claws, Han Sen's attack didn't stand a chance. Before Han Sen could even attack, the creature had brushed aside his attack and rushed within striking distance. The hand knife and the claws collided. The claws left deep cuts across Han Sen's gauntlet. 3 bloody scratches across his hand before to ooze blood. Fortunately, Han Sen was able to react quickly. He abandoned his attack and then teleported away. If he hadn't reacted instantly, the creature's blow would have amputated his hands. Why is it so strong? Han Sen wondered in shock. He had just finished teleporting away when the xenogeneic was in front of him again. Its claws came down on his chest, cutting straight through the Apollo armor like it was made of butter. The wings of the Apollo set flapped. Han Sen quickly retreated, putting more distance between himself and the xenogeneic. But there was a glow of bloody light around the creature's body, and it came for him again like a rocket. Its speed was unfathomable, and again, its claws were digging into Han Sen's chest. The red substance chains became claw-like lights, and they carved 5 grooves deep into Han Sen's chest. His ribs were almost visible through the wounds. Is this guy really just primitive? Han Sen muttered in consternation. He used Under the Sky and teleported rapidly as he attempted to get ahead of the xenogeneic. But it was a futile endeavor. The xenogeneic seemed to predict every movement Han Sen sought to make. Han Sen had only just moved away when the xenogeneic was in front of him again. Han Sen screamed, his voice strained. A talon had perforated his stomach. If Han Sen hadn't teleported away fast enough, his guts would have been strung across the floor. He was fortunate that the Apollo set was a deified treasure. But even so, beneath the sharp claws of that malevolent xenogeneic, it seemed no stronger than wet tissue. It didn't have the defensive properties that a deified set of armor should have given him. Han Sen had no idea what to do. Although he was fighting a primitive deified, it was only a doppelganger. His true opponent, the real body controlling the creature before him, was a scary true god deified. This body was just a doppelganger, but it was undoubtedly the best that a deified could be at primitive class. It was in a whole different league than Shale, who had just become a deified. Even more frightening, its will and its movements were true god class. Han Sen was very proud of his will and power, but before a true god, his capabilities were measly. He was borrowing power from the Apollo set so he could fight at a deified level, but he still couldn't endure the xenogeneic's attacks. Every very high that came to defeat this doppelganger would usually encounter a larva deified for them to kill. Transmutation class deifieds would still take a long time to kill. Exquisite and Li Qier had told Han Sen this was only a primitive deified. They hadn't told him how scary the creature was, though. Once Han Sen realized how powerful it was, he knew he shouldn't push his luck and continue trying to fight it. He used his teleportation abilities to escape Jail Demon Hall. The attacks he had already survived had left him bloody and injured. If he kept going, there was no doubting the fact he would end up dead. Is that xenogeneic really a primitive deified? Han Sen asked, still clutching the wound in his belly. He looked at Li Qier and Exquisite with suspicion. It is true. It really is a primitive class deified, but he is the greatest primitive deified alive. We thought that with your power and will, you could fight it. That is why we signed you up to take it on. I can only suppose we were too hasty, Exquisite said, making sure that her voice sounded quite serious. Her facial expression was a carefully crafted mask of disappointment. In her heart, she was actually thinking, it is good for you to suffer failure every now and again. We don't want you getting too cocky in the future. Li Qier provided her own sort of comfort. She smiled and said, losing here is perfectly understandable. After all, you aren't yet deified. Not being able to beat that fiend means nothing. How about this? We will find weaker deified xenogeneics that are easier for you to defeat. Han Sen knew Li Qier and Exquisite wouldn't be lying to him about this stuff. If they said that the xenogeneic was a primitive deified, then it probably was. That xenogeneic really was strong. Han Sen paused, observing Exquisite and Li Qier. Then, he said, is there a time limit to kill this xenogeneic? It will take 6 months for the Jail Demon Hall xenogeneic to build up enough power to escape its prison. Usually, our people try to kill it within 3 months, just to be on the safe side. If it escapes and gets in contact with the other xenogeneics in outer sky, it might be able to save its true self, Li Qier said. If there is still time, then I will try to defeat it again. Han Sen didn't want to just give up. Of course you can. If you are confident enough, you can try as many times as you want. But this doppelganger has already been here for a month. If you cannot kill it in the next couple of months, we will have to send in a deified elite that is strong enough to kill it. So, remember, you have a limited amount of time, Exquisite said. That should be more than enough, I should think, Han Sen said with a nod. He was still thinking about the fight he had just endured against that xenogeneic. Han Sen thought his fighting power was decent at this point, but that xenogeneic had completely suppressed him in every way imaginable. Aside from the power gap between them, there were also important differences in the ways that the two of them fought. Now that he thought about it some more, he realized he had been completely suppressed. He had lost in the most embarrassing way possible. It was just a doppelganger, and yet, it had such a scary amount of power. I wonder how strong its true self is, then? Han Sen wondered to himself. Exquisite and Li Qier looked at each other. They had played Han Sen perfectly, and now they could barely suppress their laughter. Han Sen didn't know that the doppelganger he battled was different from most other doppelgangers. It was kind of like a child of the true god xenogeneic. Although its power was indeed primitive class, the battle experience it possessed and its skill and will were top-notch. Han Sen was the only person who would struggle to defeat such a beast. Even most deifieds would lose badly against this opponent. Let him lose a few more times against it. Let's wear him down a bit, Li Qier smiled and thought to herself. Han Sen's wounds recovered quickly. To aid his self-recovery power, Li Qier and Exquisite provided him with a genofluid produced from xenogeneic genes. It was very good for healing one's physical wounds. With the combination of those two powers, every speck of damage had disappeared within 7 or 8 hours. Over the next few days, Han Sen went to the Jail Demon Hall to do battle against the xenogeneic. He came up with many different plans to bring the creature down, but every attempt was useless. The longest Han Sen was able to last inside was 2 minutes. Once he was done, he had to teleport away. If he hadn't, he would have been killed. He would only be given a sliver of time to cast his knife airs. Even when he used Under the Sky, it seemed to do nothing to the xenogeneic. Not only did he fail to kill it, but he couldn't inflict a single wound on his foe. It really is too strong. Han Sen couldn't help but compliment how frighteningly powerful his latest xenogeneic opponent really was. But despite his repeated defeats, he never thought about giving up. As soon as his body recovered, he went back to the jail demon hall to fight. He was determined to find a way to kill it. But every time he went there, he would leave disappointed. The xenogeniac was too strong to be predictable, and so Han Sen couldn't figure out the creature's patterns and use those to manipulate it, either. The more Han Sen went, the more Likir and Exquisite started to worry. They had only wanted to get rid of some of Han Sen's pride. They wanted to use that xenogeniac to wear down his resolve. But if he kept going on like this, and he eventually broke down completely, they would have a destroyed silkworm on their hands. Fortunately, they hadn't sensed any sign that Han Sen was about to give up. Although he kept losing, after each failure, he would just start thinking about how he might defeat the beast the next time he did battle. His entire mind seemed devoted to coming up with ways to defeat the fiend. He never wasted brain power on thinking about anything else. That made Exquisite and Likir feel a little safer with what they were doing. They just hoped that the time limit would pass soon. Then, Han Sen would have no choice but to give up. It wouldn't destroy too much of his confidence, they predicted. No, that still won't work. Han Sen failed again. He dragged his body, which was riddled with slashes and puncture wounds, out of the jail demon hall. He shook his head. Exquisite and Likir weren't there. Because Han Sen now spent his entire days either fighting or healing, they stopped hanging around after the first few days. It was dull. They would occasionally come back to feel how Han Sen felt during the fight, but not all of the time. Also, due to the fact that Han Sen kept losing, they were only learning how to deal with failure. That didn't help them much. Because there wasn't much else for them to learn, they stopped focusing on his thoughts as much. It looks like taking down that xenogeniac won't be easy. Hey wait, it's almost time to meet up with Mr. White. I need to go to the core area. Han Sen thought about the Shin Yellow Sutra, and he realized it was time for him to take a break from fighting. When he saw Likir again, Han Sen mentioned his need to visit the core area again. Likir hastily agreed to his request. She and Exquisite had grown worried about Han Sen's constant fighting in the jail demon hall. They were worried that being defeated endlessly might do too much damage to his confidence. Now that Han Sen had expressed a desire to go to the core area, they thought it was a best-case scenario. Likir took Han Sen back to the oasis so he could enter the core area. Of course, Gu Qingcheng was there at the place they were supposed to meet. When he saw Gu Qingcheng there, Han Sen couldn't wait to ask, "Okay, what did you learn? Did you receive news from Mr. White?" "This is what Mr. White asked me to give you." Gu Qingcheng passed a notebook to Han Sen, alongside the original version of the Shin Yellow Sutra. Han Sen accepted them and put away the Shin Yellow Sutra. He opened up the notebook to have a look. The pages were filled with an elegant script, which had clearly been written by hand. The notebook had 100 pages, and almost all of them contained notes. There were only 2 or 3 pages that were empty. Clearly, Mr. White had put a lot of effort into this. Mr. White really is so nice. There weren't many people who were as kind as Mr. White, Han Sen decided. He was the sort of person who did impressive things and achieved a lot. He was no common man. Instead of leaving the core area, Han Sen remained there to read Mr. White's notebook. He didn't want Likir and Exquisite looking over his shoulder as he studied. Metaphorically speaking, the content of the notebook was a detailed analysis of the Shin Yellow Sutra. It also had notes on the problems it might cause and the aftermath of using it. As Han Sen read through the content of the notebook, he learned a great deal. And not just about the Shin Yellow Sutra, either. He began to understand the Dongshin Sutra and the Blood Pulse Sutra to a higher level. Mr. White is a real grandmaster. Compared to him, I am just a peasant with some good luck and a bit of motivation, Han Sen murmured, shaking his head as he closed the notebook. Actually, Han Sen's compliment wasn't strictly accurate. Everyone's path to study was different. Mr. White had focused on acquiring knowledge. He knew so much, which put him on a higher plane than Han Sen when it came to intellectual pursuits. But then again, Han Sen wasn't the sort of person who focused on amassing huge amounts of knowledge, so it wasn't strange that Mr. White outmatched him in that area. Comparing the two men in such a singular way wasn't very fair. Han Sen memorized everything that was written in the notebook, but he didn't want to destroy it. After all, Mr. White put in the time and effort to write it all out by hand. Take this back to Planet Eclipse and ask Zero to hide it. Han Sen gave the notebook to Gu Qingqing so she could take it back. After Gu Qingqing left, Han Sen tried to digest the content of the notebook. The more he thought about it, the more shaken he felt. Based on what Mr. White had described, if Han Sen finished practicing the Xin Yellow Sutra, it would become a very scary power. Is it really possible to reverse blood pulse? Han Sen was shocked. If what Mr. White told him about the Xin Yellow Sutra was accurate, it was terrifying. In his writing in the notebook, even Mr. White had admitted that his thoughts on the Xin Yellow Sutra were only theories. He hadn't tested any of these predictions in the real world. To find out how much power the Geno art would really have, Han Sen would have to practice it. Mr. White did mention, however, that there were risks associated with practicing the Xin Yellow Sutra. The Geno art could theoretically reverse a person's bloodline, but doing so would be very dangerous. Attempting such a feat would have consequences throughout Han Sen's body. If his body was unable to withstand those effects, the ramifications could be dire. Han Sen was very tempted to learn it because of the scary powers that the Xin Yellow Sutra offered, but the risks were severe enough to make him hesitate. Since I don't need to practice the Xin Yellow Sutra and I don't actually need to use it, there is no point in me trying to reverse my bloodline. After Han Sen came to this conclusion, he decided to put the Xin Yellow Sutra out of his mind. Now, he turned his attention back to the Xenogeniac in Jail Demon Hall. He had less than a month to go. If he was unable to kill it in that amount of time, then he would lose this opportunity. He would need to wait for the next doppelganger to show up before he could fight it again. How can I kill it then? I will have to wait until Liquier and Exquisite are somewhere else so I can try to kill it with a different Geno art. That's my best chance, Han Sen thought to himself. When he left the core area, Liquier was there waiting for him in the oasis. Why are you back here so soon? Liquier wasn't worried like she had been the last time. She was actually surprised to see him return so quickly. In truth, she had been hoping that Han Sen would stay in the core area until the Xenogeniac in Jail Demon Hall was killed. I was just meeting up with a friend. I don't have much time. I need to kill that Xenogeniac in Jail Demon Hall, so I couldn't stay there for very long, Han Sen said. You're really going to keep trying, aren't you? You're planning on returning to Jail Demon Hall, Liquier said to Han Sen. Why shouldn't I keep going there? It is rare to tackle such a powerful enemy, and it isn't as if I have to worry about my safety. This is the perfect opportunity for me to hone my skills, Han Sen said with sincerity. Liquier looked at Han Sen, her head tilted slightly to the side. She could sense that Han Sen was speaking the truth. No matter which race they came from, ordinary people would struggle to maintain their drive and dedication in the face of such overwhelming failure. Most people could only have their dreams crushed so many times before they gave up. Han Sen had failed many times already, but he hadn't been broken down. His resolve was strong, and he clearly intended to keep on going. That sort of personality had its upsides and downsides, that was for sure. Liquier opened her mouth to say something, but no words materialized. She didn't want to destroy Han Sen's positivity. Whatever. There is only a month left. With his unbreakable determination, it shouldn't bode too ill for him, Liquier thought to herself. After returning to Jail Demon Hall, Han Sen continued to challenge that Xenogeniac every day. And every day, he kept failing. After 2 weeks had passed, Liquier and Exquisite rarely visited anymore. He had failed far too many times, and he had yet to learn anything new. There was no reason for them to spend time watching such pointless fights. While he was occupied doing his own thing, the girls wanted to practice the knife skill under the sky, which they had learned from Han Senator, although their mental access to Han Sen's personal experience made it easier for them to cast the powerful skill. They were still having difficulty getting anywhere close to the talent Han Sen had with the skill. He is very talented when he fights. This kind of knife skill and knife mind are very rare to see. He should be a great help for us when practicing the very high sense, Liquier complimented. It is a shame he isn't one of the very high. Otherwise, with his level of talent, he might be able to practice the very high sense, Exquisite said, her voice carrying a distinct note of regret. Liquier sneered slightly. What is good about practicing the very high sense, anyway? I don't want to become one of those cold-blooded monsters. If I was given the choice, I would have never decided to practice it at all. It is because you have a tin armor talent. Those with an armor talent that high must practice the very high sense. That is the rule of being one of the very high, Exquisite said. But why me? I really wish my talents were below 9 armors, Li Qier grumbled. Han Sen lost his next fight. He stumbled out of jail demon hall, covered with injuries. But then, he suddenly saw a very high man standing outside the hall looking at him. Han Sen didn't recognize this very high, but the man's eyes definitely looked hostile. This guy can't be Li Shuecheng, can he? Han Sen thought to himself. In his time in Outer Sky, Liu Zhan and Li Shuecheng were the 2 people he had offended the most. He had seen Liu Zhan before, but he had never seen what Li Shuecheng looked like. Even if this man wasn't Li Shuecheng, he was probably related to those 2. Han Sen, you have been using Jail Demon Hall for 2 months. If you cannot kill the Red Blood Demon, then get out of there. Don't waste people's time, Li Shuecheng said, staring at Han Sen. Li Shuecheng and Liu Zhan had lost everything after the silkworm fights. All they had left were their undies. Their parents had helped them pay back most of their debts, but they still owed a lot to a lot of people. Right now, the 2 men had nothing. Literally nothing. Even the resources they needed for practice had to be used as payment for others. Li Shuecheng had the idea of fighting the Red Blood Demon. The Red Blood Demon xenogeneic gene was required in order to craft a particular deified treasure. If he could get his hands on that xenogeneic gene, then Li Shuecheng could use it to earn more resources. Li Shuecheng couldn't kill the Red Blood Demon alone, but he had his family backing him. If his family helped, he could probably take down the Red Blood Demon. But when Li Shuecheng went to Open Sky Elder to request admittance to Jail Demon Hall, he was told that Han Sen had already registered there to be the one that killed it. He would have to wait until Han Sen failed before applying again. Li Shuecheng didn't believe Han Sen had what it took to slay the Red Blood Demon, so he came to the Jail Demon Hall to see how things were progressing. And there, he found Han Sen getting repeatedly wrecked by the Red Blood Demon. Exquisite told me I still have a month to go from the time I was allotted when I was signed up. Is that incorrect? Han Sen asked coldly, meeting at Li Shuecheng's gaze. If you don't have the required power, another month won't make any difference. Why not just give up now? Save yourself some time and stop inconveniencing others, Li Shuecheng shot back. I see. You say others, but you really just want me to do something that will benefit you, Han Sen said to Li Shuecheng, squinting slightly. You are correct. Rather than staying here and wasting everyone's time, just quit and save us all the trouble, Li Shuecheng said flatly. You are right. Making the lives of others more convenient is a nice thing to do. I shouldn't waste someone else's time. I should have finished here sooner, Han Sen said with a nod. He looked like he was agreeing with what Li Shuecheng said. That is a reasonable way of thinking. If you want to cancel your registration, you must visit Open Sky Elder. I can take you there, if you want, Li Shuecheng said, expecting Han Sen to genuinely throw in the towel. No, no, no. You misunderstood me. I will kill the Red Blood Demon. Therefore, there will be no need for you to waste more time waiting for me, Han Sen said with a laugh. Kill it? What are you going to kill it with boasting? Li Shuecheng looked at him with disdain. The Red Blood Demon wasn't like ordinary primitive deifieds. Not even Han Sen's Apollo set would be enough to let him fight the creature. Han Sen had already stated his intentions. He was going to kill the Red Blood Demon. Han Sen acted as if it would be the simplest thing in the world, but to any of the very high, it would have sounded like he was daydreaming. If you don't believe me, then feel free to wait around. It isn't my time that's being wasted, after all. Han Sen shrugged, as if he didn't care one way or another. After that, Han Sen settled himself next to the stone pavilion to rest. The damaged Apollo set would take a while to recover, as well. Fortunately, the Apollo set was good at mending damage it had sustained. If it hadn't possessed such advanced self-repair abilities, it would have been a pile of scrap metal already. Red Blood Demon's fighting abilities are overpowered. If I was already a primitive deified, killing it would be easy. But right now, as I am, depending on the power of treasures will make it very difficult for me to bring this beast down. Han Sen kept thinking about how he fought before. He was trying to find a way in which he might kill the Red Blood Demon. Because Exquisite and Li Qier had been focusing on practicing under the sky, they hadn't been visiting Han Sen very often. Han Sen thought that he was right on the precipice of his chance to succeed. He just needed to find a chance to fight the red blood demon when they were not around. Then, he could use whichever Geno art or beast soul he fancied. Li Shuicheng frowned. The Very High were very strict about their rules. Even though he was one of the Very High, he couldn't circumvent the rules. If Han Sen wasn't going to give up, Li Shuicheng really would have to wait another month. If Han Sen couldn't kill the red blood demon before the time limit, Li Shuicheng could register for permission to enter and slay the fiend. But Li Shuicheng was being hung to dry. He was in a rush to get as many resources as possible, so he didn't want to wait a month. He rolled his eyes. He walked to the stone pavilion, looked at Han Sen, and said, "You said you will find a way to kill the red blood demon, right?" "That is correct," Han Sen said with a nod. He had been fighting the red blood demon for a while now, and he hadn't really gotten much out of it, other than a general understanding of the red blood demon's capabilities. "Very good," Li Shuicheng said, nodding to himself. Then, he turned around and left. That surprised Han Senator. He wasn't sure what the man meant by that. Han Sen had thought Li Shuicheng would hang around and annoy him for a while, but the man left without another word. Han Sen thought about the expression he had seen on Li Shuicheng's face, though. It was unlikely that the man would give up so easily. Li Shuicheng left Jail Demon Hall to seek out Liu Zhan. "You know that Han Sen has been in Jail Demon Hall trying to kill the red blood demon, right?" Li Shuicheng asked Liu Zhan. "So? Does it matter whether I know this or not?" Liu Zhan was annoyed by just hearing Han Sen's name. He had lost so much on his wager during the silkworm fights. Although his family had paid off much of the debt, he still had a lot he needed to repay. Paying it all off would be incredibly difficult. At this time, Liu Zhan was in no mood to wonder about what Han Sen was doing. Just thinking about how to pay off all of his debts was enough to make his head explode. "I was going to ask for someone's help to kill the red blood demon and gather more resources, but Han Sen registered to kill the red blood demon before I did. I need to wait another month before I can register." Li Shuicheng explained what had happened. "What is that supposed to mean?" Liu Zhan didn't understand why Li Shuicheng was bothering to tell him all this. The Very High were strict when it came to the law. The two young men had no choice but to abide by them. If Han Sen had already registered for permission to hunt, then as long as he didn't concede, no one could go there and attempt to steal his kill. As far as I know, he has been in the Jail Demon Hall for a while. He has been fighting the red blood demon every day. I don't think he can actually kill the red blood demon. I think he wants to use the red blood demon to practice his fighting skills. I think he will keep going until his time there is up," Li Shuicheng said. "Is there a problem with that? Many of our people do the same thing." Liu Zhan still didn't understand what Li Shuicheng was talking about, but he knew the other man had to be hinting at something. Upon hearing Liu Zhan say this, Li Shuicheng laughed. But there was something sinister in the sound of his laugh. He said, "You know that many students of our race have done this in the past. Why have fewer attempted such a thing in recent years?" "That is because," Liu Zhan trailed off halfway through his response. He now understood what Li Shuicheng was getting at. He looked at Li Shuicheng with shock and said, "You want to use the glitch in Jail Demon Hall to kill Han Sen? That isn't very nice. If the rest of our people find out, it will be considered a huge crime. We might end up being exiled to confinement on a small and empty island. Not if Han Sen activated the glitch himself. If that happened, it would have nothing to do with us," Li Shuicheng grinned darkly. He then went on to say, "He was the reason that we lost everything. Are you really going to sit back and accept that?" Jail Demon Hall's restrictions originally weren't as strong as the real body of the red blood demon. Because of that, the beast almost managed to escape. When it was realized how close the red blood demon came to escaping, our elders added another security measure to guarantee that the red blood demon could never break free. If the doppelganger gains enough power to break out of the first level of restrictions, then the extra security protocol goes into effect. Jail Demon Hall instantly goes into complete lockdown. A long time ago, one of our primitive deified warriors was battling the red blood demon. The red blood demon became enraged and activated that special restriction. When the Jail Demon Hall went into lockdown, it trapped that primitive deified inside. He was unable to teleport away. When they opened Jail Demon Hall again, they found that the red blood demon had already eaten the man. All that was left of him was a little blood on the floor. Liu Zhan said quietly, but when that happened, they decided to modify the restrictions. They increased the level of power needed to trigger it. Unless the red blood demon went completely nuts, I don't think it would be able to trigger that security measure again. Han Sen can't really threaten the red blood demon, so there's no way he could inspire that much fury in the creature. So, how could he trigger the glitch? If he isn't able to do it, we can help him. Every time he leaves the hall, he's badly injured. He uses very high geno fluids to heal. You've met the man before, and you have a connection to the current situation that I think we can exploit. I'm sure you can give him some better geno fluid to recover, right? Li Shuicheng said. You mean like blood marrow geno fluid? Liu Zhen's eyes brightened. Now he knew what Li Shuicheng really meant. Blood marrow geno fluid was made from the red blood demon's xenogeneic genes. It was very good for recovering from injuries. Of all the healing geno fluids that existed, it was one of the priciest. It was usually used by deified elites. It worked very well for deified wounds, so its efficiency with kings went without saying. As long as a person wasn't dead, they could be healed in a short amount of time. But not many knew that because the blood marrow geno fluid was made from the red blood demon's xenogeneic genes, the red blood demon was very sensitive to it. Using a small amount wouldn't have much of an effect. But if Han Sen used too much and then entered Jail Demon Hall, it might trigger the true ire of the red blood demon. Because Han Sen was being injured every day, he required a lot of healing geno fluids. Exquisite came to see him every few days to resupply him. Aside from providing him with healing geno fluids, she gave him other kinds of geno fluids as well. They could help with all sorts of things involving his body and his practice. They were fluids synthesized by the very high themselves. Due to the wealth of resources available in outer sky, Han Sen was being given access to resources that few kings could ever hope to get their hands on. The very high didn't have a large population. They didn't have many people devoted to producing healing geno fluids, but they also rarely used healing geno fluids themselves. So, most of the time, the very high created the geno fluids quite slowly. They kept enough on hand for ordinary use, but as Han Sen stubbornly continued to fight the red blood demon, he had created a situation that the very high were uniquely unprepared for. Within a month, Han Sen had almost cleared out their geno fluid reserves. If he wanted more, he would have to wait for more to be created. That meant one every few days. Why are there no more healing geno fluids? Han Sen saw the geno fluids Exquisite had brought him, and he noticed they weren't the same geno fluids he usually used. Rather than the healing fluids that he really needed, these other geno fluids would merely reinforce his genes and physical power. Even if there was a whole warehouse full of healing geno fluid, it wouldn't be enough to support the amount you keep consuming, Exquisite said. She pointed toward a box with 6 red geno fluids and went on to say, "This is a high-class healing geno fluid. They only offer it to deified fighters. Since there are no more of the weaker fluids available, you are being gifted these. Do not go through them willy-nilly. If you use up these, you won't be granted any more for the next 2 weeks." Exquisite didn't know that blood marrow geno fluid had the xenogeneic genes of the red blood demon in it. After all, few people knew exactly what was inside a medicine when they took it. The red blood demon's xenogeneic genes were just one element of these fluids. They weren't even the primary ingredient. Even if Exquisite had known the xenogeneic genes were in the fluid, she wouldn't have known about the potential side effects in this situation. Liu Zhen and Li Shuicheng knew about this because one of their elders had used a large amount of blood marrow geno fluid before going into the jail demon hall to kill the red blood demon. The red blood demon had instantly gone into a fury. Luckily, the man had been a larva-class deified. Despite the red blood demon's rage, he had been able to kill it. Only a few people who were close to that elite knew about this. Exquisite and Li Qier didn't know much about that elite, so they didn't know how taking the geno fluid would affect the monster inside the hall. Liu Zhen and Li Shuicheng wouldn't have come up with this plan if the creature's reaction to the geno fluid was generally known. Hearing that there was an even better geno fluid that he could use, Han Sen was more than pleased. If he could recover faster, he could spend more time fighting the red blood demon. Although he was unable to beat the red blood demon, he was honing his talents as he fought the creature. That was because the red blood demon had been continuously suppressing him. Han Sen had gained a huge amount of experience by being so determined. This kind of wound really hurts. Han Sen looked down at his chest and saw his exposed heart, which had come close to being shredded. He had a wry smile. If Han Sen had lacked his impressive abilities of recovery, such a strike would have likely killed him. Opening a blood marrow geno fluid, Han Sen quickly gulped it all down. He felt a warm sensation race through his body. A numb, itchy feeling passed over his wounds, and Han Sen's injuries began to heal. He watched in amazement as his wounds sealed closed. This is good stuff. No wonder this is considered a superior item, usually reserved for deified elites. The effects are 10 times stronger than what I was using before. Han Sen grinned widely when he saw the wounds heal so quickly. His wounds would have taken half a day to heal previously, but now they took less than an hour. But the Apollo set hadn't recovered yet, so Han Sen had to keep waiting. Without the Apollo set, his body wouldn't last. Han Sen didn't waste a single second of his free time, though. He practiced very real body and God's Wander for a bit. Those two Geno arts were very beneficial for him to practice with. They could be used at any time. When the Apollo set had finally recovered, Han Sen decided it was time to enter Jail Demon Hall again. But to Han Sen's surprise, the red blood demon was sitting on the stairs staring at him when he entered. It didn't attack him as soon as it saw him. What is this? Han Sen wondered. It seemed odd that on this random day, the red blood demon's temper had improved so much. While Han Sen wondered what it was doing, the red blood demon's body flashed with a bloody light. Its bug wings opened. The strange horn on its head flashed with a crimson that looked like a sun. Holy **T. What is going on with this guy? Why has it suddenly exploded with a scary power like this? Han Sen was very confused. He had fought the red blood demon for a very long time now, but he had never seen it so enraged. And it had suddenly gained a frightening amount of power. Before Han Sen had time to consider his situation, he saw the red blood demon's evil-looking crimson eyes light up like light bulbs and turn to stare at him. Han Sen didn't say anything. He just wanted to teleport away from Jail Demon Hall. Han Sen couldn't fight the red blood demon at its normal power level, but now it was a raging version of itself. For all he knew, this thing could destroy his body in one punch and cripple him, leaving him no chance of teleporting away. But the moment Han Sen ripped space open to leave, he saw all of the markings across Jail Demon Hall light up in a single, brilliant flash. The whole of the Jail Demon Hall was covered in a holy light. Pang! Han Sen bounced out of space and almost hit the ground. He descended into a nice roll, which was how he managed to maintain his balance. What is this? Why have Jail Demon Hall's restrictions flared up and sealed the entire structure with me inside? Han Sen's face changed. He looked around frantically, and he found that wavy beams of light covered every surface of the hall. The whole building was sealed up tight, and there was no getting out now. Han Sen realized that he was in a scary and dangerous situation. Jail Demon Hall was sealed, and he couldn't use God's Wander to leave. He was trapped inside with the beast. Furthermore, the red blood demon had become far more dangerous than usual. When Han Sen had fought the red blood demon previously, he could only last a few minutes. But now, the red blood demon was in a scary mode. Thinking of this, Han Sen turned his attention back to the red blood demon. The red blood demon's eyes were giving off red light. It looked like a small flashlight, the beam of which landed on Han Sen. What is this? I thought we were friends. I'm just taking a break here. You go and do your stuff? No need to worry about me. Han Sen forced a smile at the red blood demon as he spoke. The red blood demon actually smiled back at Han Senator, but that smile sent a chill down his spine. The jagged, razor-like teeth that lined its maw were particularly menacing to see. It was like a demon that could destroy and devour anything. The next second, the red blood demon let out a strange screech. Its body was like a red shadow, and it was coming straight for Han Senator. Han Sen's eyesight couldn't read its movements, either. He saw the flash of a red shadow, but the red blood demon remained where it was. Then, another red blood demon appeared in front of him. Its sharp claws were already digging into his chest.
Bang!
The talons of the red blood demon tore through Han Sen's body, and it exploded like a water balloon. The next second, the water that had separated began to gather up again. It reformed Han Sen's face, but before the water finished reconstituting Han Sen's body, the creature spread its claws again. Once more, It swung at Han Sen. The red substance chains that went with the attack erupted like a volcano. Han Sen was shocked. He had used his original Water King body to escape that first strike, but right now, his body still hadn't coalesced. If he was hit again, all of his cells that had been turned into water would become nothing. Even the original Water King body wouldn't resurrect him a second time. Han Sen could no longer afford to hesitate. In a moment, his body glowed pure white as he entered his Super God Spirit mode. The volcanic-looking red substance chains went right through him, passing harmlessly through his shadow. But just as Han Sen started using his Super God Spirit body, some strange power knocked him back out of it. He was back to his usual self in no time at all. Han Sen's stomach sank. With Wanner still inside his Destiny's Tower, his Super God Spirit mode had been severely downgraded. Again, it had been cancelled before he could use it to finish a fight. The red blood demon didn't give Han Sen any time to think. Its body became a crimson shadow that went straight for him again. It was like a real demon, and it moved toward him too fast for his eyes to follow. Han Sen teleported away, regardless. Because he wasn't trying to escape Jail Demon Hall, he didn't trigger the building's restrictions. But by the time Han Sen had teleported away, an evil smile had already crossed the red blood demon's strange face. Again, it appeared directly in front of Han Sen. 5 red clawed fingers reached forward to shred his heart. Han Sen's eye flashed red. That red color spread across his body, and then he simply disappeared. He went straight into the red blood demon's eye. Han Sen had been pushed far enough that he had no choice but to use his blood eye evil god's beast soul. With the eye skill, he entered the red blood demon's eye. Doing this might allow Exquisite and Likier to suss out the secrets of beast souls, but he had no choice. He couldn't let the red blood demon kill him just to keep his secrets. In the red blood demon's eyes, Han Sen's surroundings were pure red. It was completely different from the eyes Han Sen had entered before. Han Sen felt a bit relieved, for a moment. Just as he thought he had escaped all of the danger, he saw the redness around him begin to boil. The power rose up around him like scary flames of blood. That power carried a scary presence, and it turned the whole of the eye world into a flaming red sea. Han Sen could feel the power inside the bloody flames. He didn't dare stay there any longer. He teleported out of the red blood demon's eyes. This guy is too much for me to deal with. As soon as Han Sen teleported out, the red blood demon was coming for him with its red substance chains lashing around. It reached Han Sen in an instant. Han Sen's purple eye began to spin as he used the purple eye butterfly beast soul to trace the movements of the red blood demon. He used the power of all the beast souls he had, without hesitation. He used Move Mountain Area's area beast soul and even his own Dongshin area. He used Jade Skin, the Bloodpool Sutra, and more. He used everything he could to repel the monster. He pushed all of his powers to the max. Aside from the Peacock King's soul robe that couldn't be worn in tandem with the Apollo set, Han Sen used every beast soul he had at his disposal. Even so, Han Sen's power and speed were unable to close the gap between him and the red blood demon. He used his formation and judgment powers to their full potential, and he barely dodged the next attack. Catcha! When the red blood demon attacked for the third time, it was already too late for Han Sen to avoid. The red substance chain brushed right by his ribs. 3 of his rib bones snapped instantly, and his flesh was torn through. I have to fight for my life again. Han Sen's mind was still calm at that moment, though. Thinking too much about things wasn't going to help him now. He needed to calm down. He used the full potential of every power he could to battle the beast. He had to stall for as much time as possible, also he could be saved. Jail Demon Hall has some kind of isolation protocol? The Very High must know about this, surely. I need to keep going until the Very High come. Then I can be saved. Han Sen tried to comfort himself. But Han Sen had forgotten one thing. Outer Sky was way too big, and there weren't many of the Very High. Jail Demon Hall was far away from where most of the Very High lived. It was in the middle of nowhere, and there was usually no reason for anyone to visit. If the Very High noticed there's something amiss, it would still take them half an hour to get there. It might even take them longer than that. Han Sen didn't know if he could even last that long. At this time, Liu Zhan and Li Shuecheng had been focusing their attention on Jail Demon Hall. When they saw Jail Demon Hall's door suppress the red demon beast's light, they knew that their plan had succeeded. The red blood demon had already gone mad with rage and triggered the defensive properties of its prison. They had trapped Han Sen inside with the infuriated red blood demon. The guy in charge of Jail Demon Hall won't be able to get here for at least half an hour. And half an hour from now, I don't think there will be anything of Han Sen left to save, Liu Zhan said with a cold laugh. Li Shuecheng looked at Liu Zhan and asked, "Is the warehouse okay?" "Don't worry. Everything is fine. The healing genofluids Han Sen always used are all gone. The warehouse only has the recommended, superior healing genofluids left. No one will know that a genofluid can trigger the red demon blood's power. Even if they found out it was the blood marrow genofluid that triggered the red blood demon's rage, they couldn't blame me. It would just be an unfortunate event, caused by no one but himself." "That is great," Li Shuecheng said with relief. He smiled and went on to say, "Exquisite just gave him some genofluids too. She won't be here for another 2 days, at least. He is very dead this time. He is such a genius. It is a shame he has to die. But no one asked him to be our enemy." Exquisite and Li Qier were practicing under the sky, trying to employ Han Sen's experience to their advantage. All of a sudden, both of their phones rang at the same time. They saw the number, and it shocked them. "Why is the inspection department calling us?" Li Qier asked with confusion. She quickly answered her phone. It didn't take long for Li Qier and Exquisite's faces to change. Li Qier screamed, "What? Jail Demon Hall's restrictions have been triggered?" Because Jail Demon Hall's restriction powers had been activated, they had no way of learning what was going on inside, either. All of their scrying powers had been cut off due to the hall's defenses. So, right now, even the inspection department couldn't tell what was happening inside the hall. They had already sent out an agent. When they found out who was in charge of Han Sen's challenge to the red blood demon, they contacted Exquisite and Li Qier. They asked if the two women knew if Han Sen was inside, because the restrictions had been triggered 10 minutes before. "It is over." Exquisite and Li Qier felt cold. Only Han Sen had permission to hunt inside that hall, so he was the only person inside. If the red blood demon had triggered the defenses, Han Sen was probably the reason that it had done so. After the two of them spoke to the inspection department, they used God's Wander to travel to Jail Demon Hall. They prayed Han Sen wasn't inside. But the closer they got to Jail Demon Hall, the colder they felt. That was because they couldn't sense their connection with Han's Senator. Something was smothering their ability to feel what he was feeling. There weren't many powers that could sever their connection with Han's Senator. The power that bound the true god Xenogeniac within Jail Demon Hall was one of the only things that could. There was an 80% to 90% chance that Han Sen was trapped inside Jail Demon Hall. He could even be dead already. Every second inside Jail Demon Hall was a desperate scramble as Han Sen attempted to cling to life. Thus far, he had only been inside the hall for 1 minute, and his body had already incurred 7 or 8 wounds. Those wounds were so deep that bones were visible inside them. A minute. This isn't the way. Han Sen felt terrible. His power was no match for the monsters, and the skills he had were losing their effectiveness. "I have to try this out." As Han Sen teleported away, he used the moment's reprieve to pull out a piece of gear. It was a peculiar bottle. The handle was the tail of 2 sirens. It was the holy item siren bottle from the sirens in the Extreme King. Han Sen tapped on the left side of the siren bottle, but before he could take the next step, the red blood demon was in front of him. Its sharp claws were like knives, and Han Sen was unable to avoid them. He immediately summoned the shield of the Medusa's gaze to block the red blood demon's scary attacks. Although Han Sen couldn't use the power of the shield to attack, it still had amazing defenses. The red blood demon's claws came down on the shield but failed to deal any damage to it. The scary power blasted Han Sen and the shield away, though. Pang! Han Sen's body slammed into the back wall of the hall. His entire body felt as if it had been shattered. It was almost too painful for him to stand back up. Han Sen got control of his pain and teleported away. The next moment, the red blood demon was right where Han Sen had just been. The red substance chains lashed out against the wall and made the spells flash. The siren bottle that had fallen to the floor was glowing weirdly. It displayed the face of the Siren Virgin. Siren Virgin, I'm in trouble. Help me get rid of this guy. Han Sen quickly shouted at the Siren Virgin when she appeared. Han Sen had just said that when the red blood demon's talons flashed toward him again. Han Sen flapped his Apollo wings and, through careful judgment, decided to veer left. He managed to evade the attack, but the red blood demon's body flashed again. Those claws were right in front of Han Sen once more. Han Sen tried his best to dodge, but a substance chain still connected with his shoulder. The blow opened him deeply enough to expose pale white bones inside his flesh. The red blood demon? The Siren Virgin said in shock when she saw the red blood demon. It's good that you know this creep. This is just a doppelganger, though. It is only primitive class. Do you know how to deal with it? Han Sen immediately asked as he teleported again. With a wry smile, the Siren Virgin said, If my true body was still here, perhaps I could fight it. But right now, I still don't have a body. There is no way for me to help you. Although it is just a doppelganger, the red blood demon is a doppelganger that carries the battle experience of its true self. It isn't like an ordinary primitive deified. So, I wish you luck. After that, the body of the Siren Virgin shrank. She returned to the siren bottle. Han Sen didn't have any time to be angry. The red blood demon was already on him again. He had nowhere to dodge, so he had to use the shield of the Medusa's gaze to block the strike again. Although the shield protected Han Sen's body from the creature's claws, it did nothing to soften the impact of the strike. It made Han Sen's body feel like it had been struck by a big hammer. Han Sen was unable to fight the fiend, and he knew he couldn't escape. He was at a dead end. I can't keep going on like this. If this keeps up, my body isn't going to last. Even if I find a chance to strike back, I won't have any strength left to do so. I guess I will just have to try this. Han Sen gritted his teeth. The blood pulse sutra inside his body began to surge like mad, but this time, it was different. The blood pulse sutra's path ran in complete reverse. This Geno art was no longer the blood pulse sutra. It was the Shin Yellow Sutra Han Sen had fished out of the underworld lake. It was a different Geno art entirely from the blood pulse sutra. Han Sen was desperate. He had to try every option he had before it was too late. If Mr. White's theory of the Shin Yellow Sutra was correct, perhaps the Shin Yellow Sutra was the last thing that could save Han Sen's life. If someone else had attempted to practice the Shin Yellow Sutra, it would have been extremely hard. But to cast it, Han Sen only had to reverse the Blood Pulse Sutra. He hadn't even needed to practice with it. But this was Han Sen's first time casting the Shin Yellow Sutra. He didn't know what would happen after he used it. The Blood Pulse Sutra's power was gunning in reverse through Han Sen's body. It made him feel like his entire body was covered in static. It made him feel as if his body wasn't coursing with blood, but with electricity instead. The tingling pain almost made Han Sen, a man with a strong will, scream aloud. The Blood Pulse Sutra usually released a red aura. In reverse, though, that color darkened to a red that was nearly black. It was like old, dried-up blood. The red blood demon was unbothered by this change. Its eyes still looked murderous, and it swung its claws at Han Sen again. It would be too hard for Han Sen to dodge. His body was in so much pain that it felt like he was going to be torn apart. There was no way he could dodge the next strike. Han Sen gritted his teeth to endure the pain and raised his shield to protect his body. At the same time, he punched toward the red blood demon. The red blood demon ignored Han Sen's fist as the claws came down upon the surface of the shield. Han Sen clutched the shield desperately. He moaned in pain. The reversed Blood Pulse Sutra released its power, and it felt as if his body was being torn apart. The pain he felt was too difficult to describe. Pang! The red blood demon's blow came down on the shield. Han Sen's body flew away with the shield, but the Shin Yellow Sutra he cast also hit the red blood demon. Han Sen hit the seal again, and he once more coughed up blood, but he noticed that his wounds weren't as grievous as they had been. Then, to his shock, Han Sen realized that the Blood Pulse Sutra had become half-deified. It had finally completed a key step in its ascension, combining the 9 tiers to revert back to 1. He quickly looked at the red blood demon. He wanted to know if the Shin Yellow Sutra had worked or not. The results were disappointing. The red blood demon didn't look as if it had been injured. It looked the same as it always had. Its presence was oh so scary. Before Han Sen could really get a good look at it, the red blood demon was already committed to another attack. Oh no, this is the end of the line for the great Han Sen. The Shin Yellow Sutra didn't work, Han Sen thought sadly. If the Shin Yellow Sutra didn't work, he would have to use the shield of the Medusa's gaze again. But with his body already injured, using the shield would probably end up sucking him dry again. This time he could die, and it was way too big of a risk. So, despite the dire nature of his situation, Han Sen hesitated to use the power of the shield. But as he hesitated, something unbelievable happened. Han Sen could feel the red blood demon's power and speed lessen. Han Sen used a teleportation trick to avoid the red blood demon's next attack. The creature's reaction speeds were clearly much slower than they had been before. Its reduced speed gave Han Sen the opportunity to slide out of range. Although Han Sen was still mostly outmatched by the red blood demon, he discovered that his powerful predictive abilities, when used in concert with God's wonder, were allowing him to begin protecting himself from the creature's attacks. Has the Shin Yellow Sutra started working? But this effect is much weaker than I thought it would be. It has only made the red blood demon a little bit slower. Even though his thoughts were negative, Han Sen was quite happy with this result. Although his enemy was only a little weaker, it was enough for him to keep going. He wouldn't be killed by the red blood demon, and that meant he could wait for the very high to rescue him. But as time went by, he noticed that the red blood demon's power was continuing to decrease. Its red substance chains became thinner and thinner, and many of them were starting to fray and break. What is going on? Han Sen thought in confused excitement. If this was the power of the Shin Yellow Sutra, then it really was scary. It was even weakening the red blood demon's substance chains, which were the essence of a deified's power. The shine of the red blood demon's armor started to dim, and its body seemed to be changing. The creature started to expand. It was like watching a bodybuilder slowly being transformed into a fat man. The body became bigger, but the strength and speed of the being decreased. Han Sen's fight was becoming easier and easier. He wasn't quite able to beat the red blood demon yet, but he was certainly able to protect himself. He didn't need to teleport away anymore, at the very least. While Han Sen reveled in his sudden good fortune, he saw the red blood demon's blood-red substance chains explode like fireworks. Life force was leaving Han Sen's enemy like the air from a leaking balloon. This cannot be a deified dropping to become half-deified, can it? Han Sen couldn't believe his eyes. But judging from what he could see, that seemed to be what was happening. There was no other explanation that made sense. The red blood demon's entire presence was more like a king class now, and its power was insufficient to generate substance chains. It didn't look deified at all. Pang! Han Sen was still holding the shield of the Medusa's gaze, and with it, he blocked the next strike from the red blood demon. Their powers were tied, and Han Sen wasn't tossed away like he had been before. Oh crap! The Shin Yellow Sutra is ferocious. It really did bring the red blood demon down from deified to king class. That is so scary. Han Sen was crazily happy. Although Mr. White had predicted that the Geno art would be very strong, Han Sen hadn't expected the effect of the Shin Yellow Sutra to be that powerful. It had reversed the blood pulse of a deified creature, sending it back to king class. The red blood demon's face was covered in disbelief. It was flabbergasted about what was happening to it. Now that we are both kings, the fun can commence. Han Sen's eyes started to shine. He had been suppressed by the red blood demon for so long, and he had almost been killed. Now it was time to unleash all the pent-up anger he had built up throughout the mistreatment. Die! Han Sen thundered. He pounced like a tiger toward the red blood demon. The red blood demon's battle experience and will were still there, but its power had been reduced to that of a half-deified. Han Sen used his Apollo set and his beast souls, and he carried deified power into battle with him. Now, the advantage had switched. Although the red blood demon's mind and skills were strong, Han Sen's absolute power was still enough to turn the tables in his favor. And Han Sen's battle experience and will weren't weak, either. And after all the time he had spent fighting the red blood demon, his experience had grown. His knowledge about the way the red blood demon behaved probably exceeded what the very high knew. Before, Han Sen lacked the power to fight the red blood demon. But now, things had taken a turn. Han Sen's power had an absolute advantage, and he pressed that advantage hard, utterly suppressing the creature. His six-core snake bow kept firing arrows. All of the arrows punched through the red blood demon's body, making it weaker and weaker. Han Sen didn't know how long the Xian Yellow Sutra's power would last, but he wasn't going to wait around to find out. He focused all of his power on killing the red blood quickly. Their initial fights had only lasted a few minutes, and this one wouldn't last much longer. Within 3 minutes, the red blood demon had been punctured a dozen times, and even more marks were left across its shell. It was bleeding everywhere. The Xian Yellow Sutra didn't just weaken enemies. It made their blood pulse reverse. Their bodies would devolve. The red blood demon was a far cry from the primitive deified that it had once been. Catcha! Han Sen's bowstring started cutting. When he was halfway through slicing the red blood demon's head off, the creature was reduced to squeals as it thrashed on the ground. As he continued with his work, Han Sen saw the red blood demon's red light flash. It was starting to coalesce substance chains again. Oh no! The Xian Yellow Sutra's power is waning. Han Sen was shocked. He didn't dare delay these proceedings. He generated power and went right up to the red blood demon. He wanted to kill it completely before it had the opportunity to recover. Fortunately, Han Sen had already injured the red blood demon badly. Now, the creature was gasping its final few breaths. Exquisite and Li Qier tried their hardest to get to Jail Demon Hall. When they got there, people from the inspection department were already there. They were trying to shut down the restrictions that kept Jail Demon Hall locked. What's going on in there? Is Han Sen still inside? Exquisite asked in a rush. I don't know. When the restrictions of Jail Demon Hall activated, they cut off all connection to the outside. We have to wait until we have deactivated the added security before we can see what is going on inside. A member of the inspection department replied. Then what are you waiting for? Press the button and shut it down, Li Qier said. But the worker shook his head and said, we cannot stop it just yet. We have to wait until Open Sky Elder gets here. Why? Exquisite and Li Qier asked at the same time. Jail Demon Hall security systems are active. That means the red blood demon inside is raging already. Its power is primitive class, but even so, our strength won't be enough to tame and defeat it. We need to wait for Open Sky Elder to get here before we lift the security, the very high man explained. We don't have time to worry about that right now. Hit the button. Han Sen is still in there. Saving him is more important, Li Qier said. The very high man shook his head and said, if Han Sen was in there, it has been over half an hour. He would have been killed by the red blood demon several times over by now. It is pointless for us to open it now. We should wait for Open Sky Elder to get here. Exquisite didn't respond. She teleported past the man. She was going to press the button to open the building. The two very high men gaped in surprise. They moved to stop her, but a voice halted them. Let her open it, Open Sky Elder said as he teleported beside them. When he received the news, he had come as soon as possible, but it had already been half an hour, and therefore, it was likely too late. Liu Zhan and Li Shuiqing watched all of this unfold from afar. Their faces were gleaming with joy. Half an hour has passed. No matter how lucky Han Sen is, he will have been eaten by the red blood demon by this point. Lifting the security now is pointless, Li Shuiqing said with a chuckle. I hope Exquisite isn't too upset. I'll have to think of ways to comfort her. This will surely be an open window of opportunity for me to swoop in and work my wily charms, Liu Zhan said, grinning widely. In that case, I hope you win the damsel at the end of this tale. Li Shuiqing was so happy. It felt like he had been waiting a long time to take out Han Senator. This was ointment to the long string of bad days he had recently suffered. Exquisite, let them do it. You don't know how to lift the restrictions, and you are wasting time, Open Sky Elder told Exquisite, eyeing her as she reached out to push the button. When Exquisite heard him, she retreated and quickly exclaimed, Hurry up and lift the security keeping him in. Right now, Exquisite was feeling both numb and nauseous on the inside. Even if Han Sen died, she and Li Qier could find another silkworm. It didn't have to be Han Sen, but for some reason, she didn't want to entertain the thought of finding someone else. Merely the idea made her feel dismal. I'd never find a silkworm like Han Sen again. That's why I'm feeling like this. It must be. It must be the reason. It must. Exquisite had realized that her emotions weren't very rational, and so she was desperately trying to convince herself that they were. The two inspection department men stepped forward and pushed the button. Open Sky Elder sighed and said, Han Sen was such a rare genius. It is a shame to learn he has died in a tragedy like this. Open Sky Elder was quite familiar with Jail Demon Hall and the beast it contained, and he knew that being locked inside would have been a death sentence for Han Senator. No matter how strong Han Sen was, he was half deified, and that was that. Only by depending on the powers of treasures could he manage to fight a deified being, and that was only by a small margin. Against an ordinary deified, Han Sen might have stood a chance, but the red blood demon was far from ordinary, and when it was in its rage mode, even a larva deified might not be able to kill it. Kachacha. The restrictions binding the jail demon hall were deactivated. Not willing to wait a second longer, Exquisite rushed inside. She pushed open the door to jail demon hall. Open Sky Elder followed with haste, in case the red blood demon tried to rush through the open door and bring harm to the others. But when Exquisite pulled the door open, everyone's mouths gaped at the sight before them. Han Sen was standing in the middle of the room, one foot propped up atop the red blood demon's body. He was holding a great bow and using the taut string of the weapon like a saw blade. The string slid through the remaining flesh of the red blood demon's neck, and they watched in awe as the head of the red blood demon dropped to the ground with a wet thud. Exquisite and the others stood completely still. They were so flabbergasted that they barely knew how to react. Han Sen. He killed the raging red blood demon. Exquisite and Likier were as shocked as they were happy. Open Sky Elder and the two people from the inspection department looked at the scene with disbelief. They had a firmer grasp of how strong the red blood demon was. Han Sen was just a half-deified, and he had managed to decapitate it completely. Even if Han Sen had some help from his Apollo set, this was an unbelievable feat. Liu Zhan and Li Shuecheng, who watched all of this from afar, were just as stunned. Their eyes widened, and Li Shuecheng screamed aloud, "Impossible! How is that possible? How could Han Sen have killed the red blood demon? This is impossible." He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The raging red blood demon had been taken down by a measly half-deified. That was far beyond anyone's wildest expectations. When Han Sen had sliced off the red blood demon's head, he heard a familiar voice ring inside his head. Mutant deified xenogenic killed. Red blood demon. Xenogenic gene found. Obtained red blood demon beast soul. Han Sen didn't dare to let his mind dwell on his new acquisition. He threw the beast soul into his sea of soul without thinking about it. He had to control his thoughts very carefully to keep Exquisite and Likier from noticing that something was amiss. "Are you okay?" Exquisite asked, hurrying over to Han Senator. Although she could see that Han Sen was fine, she couldn't keep herself from asking anyway. This is nothing. Just a few wounds and scrapes," Han Sen answered, gesturing down at himself. "It is great that you're okay. We were so worried about you." "Why did the red blood demon go into a rage?" Likier asked after rushing forward to see him. "I actually don't know. As soon as I went inside, the red blood demon just went crazy. Its power exploded to obscene levels with no warning," Han Sen answered. But Han Sen didn't explain how he had managed to defeat the red blood demon. He just said he had been fortunate, and that he had to use all of his power to win. His victory basically boiled down to luck, though.
Luck? Who?
Open Sky Elder looked at Han Sen with interest. He wasn't the sort of person that believed in luck. The raging red blood demon wasn't something that could be overcome through dumb luck, but Open Sky Elder didn't push the subject any further. He only asked about the raging red blood demon. He needed to figure out why the red blood demon had gone wild. After answering a few more questions, Han Sen left with Exquisite and Likier. He finally found some time alone to check out the red blood demon beast soul. Mutant red blood demon beast soul. Demonic beast soul. Incomplete. Han Sen's eyebrows rose. This was the first time he had seen a demonic beast soul before. Also, like the Tianxia Peacock King beast soul, the red blood demon beast soul was an incomplete beast soul. He didn't know what additional strength the complete versions might offer. So, What exactly is a demonic beast soul, I wonder? Han Sen thought as he summoned it. The next second, Han Sen felt as if some scary power was washing over him. His entire body brimmed with a blood-red power. Crimson light started to leak out of his skin. Many substance chains exploded throughout his cells, changing him as they went. Soon, visible changes began to occur across Han Sen's skin. Under the influence of the light and substance chains, Han Sen's skin hardened like a shell. The red color coming from him looked just like the red blood demon. In a flash, his entire body was encased inside that protective shell. The more Han Sen grew to look like the red blood demon, the more his presence increased. Red substance chains swirled restlessly around him. This is like a shape-shifting beast soul, but it is a bit different. Transfusion shape-shifting beast souls transform my body to look like the creatures that the beast souls originally belonged to. This demonic beast soul reinforces my body as well, however. I'm basically half human and half demon, Han Sen murmured to himself, trying to get a sense for exactly how the beast soul worked. He was very pleased with his prize. Despite the change in Han Sen's appearance, the demonic beast soul wouldn't turn him into a xenogeniac. He would have both the red blood demon's power and his own human power. In demon mode, I would probably have enough power to fight the red blood demon reliably. So even if I ran into the red blood demon again, I wouldn't have such a hard time. Han Sen tried to explore the breadth of the beast soul's power. The demonic power it wielded was greater than Han Sen had expected. He liked it more and more. But what does the incomplete part mean? Does that mean the Peacock King Beast Soul and the Red Blood Demon Beast Soul can still be upgraded? If so, how do I make them complete Beast Souls? Han Sen thought to himself. The incident in Jail Demon Hall had yet to be explained. Although it was suggested that the raging of the Red Blood Demon might have been somehow connected to the blood marrow genofluid, the inspection department came to no ultimate conclusion. And before the incident, no one had known that the bone marrow genofluid could produce this sort of effect. The warehouse frequently offered that type of genofluid when they ran out of the ordinary ones, so it all seemed like one giant coincidence. No one should have been responsible for what occurred. But Han Sen thought things couldn't have been that simple. He firmly believed the event had something to do with Liu Zhan and Li Xuecheng. Li Xuecheng had visited him not long before the lockdown took place. The timing was too suspicious to be a coincidence. But there was no evidence linking the event to Li Xuecheng, and that meant Han Sen could not do anything to the man. It is a shame that the red blood demon doppelganger will take another 6 months to regenerate. Otherwise, I could go and kill it again. Maybe that would help me figure out what an incomplete beast soul is, Han Sen thought to himself as he fished at Underworld Lake. Then he heard Bauer's voice shouting to him, interrupting his thoughts. "Dad, I fished up the sheep head again," Bauer yelled as she pulled at the Underworld silk. Han Sen looked toward her and saw that she was indeed pulling the 4-sheep cube toward her. Half of it was visible through the clouds of the lake. Han Sen had gotten used to this happening. Bauer frequently caught the 4-sheep cube on the end of her line, but she was never able to bring it out of the lake. Indeed, whenever the 4-sheep cube was on the cusp of being pulled free of the lake surface, the underworld's silk tended to snap. The 4-sheep cube would sink below the white mists again. After fishing it up so many times without actually being able to catch it, Bauer was starting to get angry. As she watched the 4-sheep cube again, waiting for the moment it fell back into the lake, she decided to try something new. With her free hand, she summoned her little gourd. She aimed the gourd at the sinking 4-sheep cube. Then Bauer tapped the top of the gourd, unleashing a weird power. It was like an invisible lasso had been slung over the 4-sheep cube. It yanked the 4-sheep cube in the direction of the little gourd. Han Sen looked at Bauer with shock. The things in Underworld Lake were very special, and generally, only strings made of Underworld silk could affect them. Other powers didn't really do anything in Underworld Lake. Until an item left Underworld Lake completely, no types of power should have worked on it. Han Sen had already tried using his own powers to remove the 4-sheep cube from the lake, but it hadn't worked. If his power touched the surface of Underworld Lake, the mist would disrupt and render it null. But the little gourd's power of suction didn't seem to be affected at all by the lake. It easily pulled the 4-sheep cube up and away. Unfortunately, Bauer didn't have enough raw power, and she seemed to be struggling to pull the statue free of the clouds. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but it felt like the four-sheep cube was using its own strength to pull itself back into the lake. It was trying to return to the camouflage of the clouds. Bauer gripped her little gourd tightly, and the weight of the statue slowly began to drag her little body toward Underworld Lake. Han Sen's heartbeat sped up, and he teleported over beside her and grabbed hold of her. Han Sen sensed that a foreign power had wrapped itself around Bauer's body, and it was towing both of them toward the lake. What a scary power! Han Sen's face paled slightly. He didn't have time to think, so he simply summoned his Peacock King Soul Robe and used all of his power to remain still. His legs dug into the lakeside soil. It wasn't enough. Not even the powerful beast soul could prevent the malevolent force from pulling him closer to the lake. Han Sen's legs slowly tore a trench through the soil as he was dragged toward the lake. Han Sen and Bauer used all of their strength, and Bauer's face flushed a deep red. But she couldn't fight off that power no matter how hard she tried, and she was on the verge of falling into the lake. Han Sen was about to tell Bauer to put away the little gourd, but he suddenly felt a new power latch onto him from behind. The powerful force launched them backward, almost yanking the four-sheep cube clear of the mist. Han Sen looked behind, and with much shock, he saw that it was the 16 little pigs. They had all lined up single file, with each pig biting the tail of the next one in line. The little pig in front was biting Han Sen's soul robe, pulling him back. Mysterious spellwork glowed on the forehead of each little pig, and a strange power was spreading amongst them. Han Sen was shocked. This level of power should have been far out of reach for a mere king-class being. Even after donning his Tianxia Peacock King Soul Robe, Han Sen had still been pulled toward the lake. But the 16 little pigs were holding on just fine. That was a bit weird. Han Sen didn't put too much thought into it, though. After all, he and Bauer had been putting all of their strength into the effort. Perhaps they had only needed a tiny bit more power, and it just so happened to be provided by the 16 little pigs. The little creatures probably weren't that strong. The four-sheep cube was on the verge of being pulled out of the lake, and Han Sen could see the faces of the bronze sheep above the clouds. They almost appeared frightened. Very good. Let's pull you up so I can see what the hell you are. Realizing that their tug-of-war with the four-sheep cube was almost over, Han Sen started to get excited. Every time they had failed to pull the statue free, the sheep heads had mocked him. That had always upset Han Sen. The moment the four-sheep cube was lifted from the lake, Han Sen felt the tension on his hands loosen. Suddenly, Bauer and the little pigs were all flying backward. Pang! The 3 to 4 meter high four-sheep cube came flying out of the clouds. It landed on the soil, one of its corners digging into the ground. Grass and soil sprayed everywhere, showering Han Sen and Bauer. Ah, I finally got you out. So what on earth are you? Han Sen merrily exclaimed. He lifted himself off the ground and approached the four-sheep cube. Bauer and the little pigs came up to see it too. Han Sen, Bauer, and the little pigs surrounded the four-sheep cube. After walking around, Han Sen confirmed that the four-sheep cube was an ordinary bronze statue. He couldn't sense any life force or power coming from it. It seemed dead and inanimate. Han Sen looked at the four sheep heads, but their faces all looked the same. They had lowered eyebrows and half-closed eyes. They looked like frozen monks. They didn't seem to be mocking anyone. Weird. I swear I saw different expressions on their faces. Why aren't they changing now? Han Sen used his purple-eye butterfly to have a look, but he couldn't see anything strange about the statue. The purple-eye butterfly's rewinding power didn't work on it, either. Is this thing dead or alive? Han Sen wondered aloud, searching carefully for some sign of power from the statue. Despite its lack of response, Han Sen didn't believe that the statue was an ordinary bronze object. Han Sen reached out his hand to tap his fist against the side of the four-sheep cube. The action produced a dong-dong noise. The statue didn't look damaged at all. When Han Sen saw that, he became certain that this was no ordinary piece of bronze. With his power, even treasures made from king-class xenogeneic genes would break if he struck them. But the four-sheep cube was totally fine. That meant the material was special. Bauer jumped over to the four-sheep cube to get a better look. She said in surprise, "Dad, there are two fish." "Fish?" Han Sen asked. He flew to the top of the four-sheep cube and lowered his head to get a better view of the top of the four-sheep cube. It was full of water, and there were two goldfish inside. They were black and white. Their heads were like those of a Buddha, and their tails spread like butterfly wings. Their bodies were really fat and round. Other than their black and white coloring, they looked a little like lion head goldfish. They were swimming calmly around inside the four-sheep cube, undisturbed by their rough exodus from Underworld Lake. Bauer was squatting near the four-sheep cube. She put her hand down into the water, wanting to touch the fish. The fish were only a few inches below the surface of the water. She put her arm into the water up to her shoulder, but still, she couldn't touch those two goldfish. Han Sen frowned. He pulled out his ghost teeth knife and thrust at the white fish below the water. The white fish was so close to the surface of the water, but when Han Sen thrust the knife in, the blade sank completely into the water without getting any closer to the white goldfish. The two fish inside didn't seem to know what was going on. They continued swimming around slowly. Han Sen frowned. Ghost teeth knife generated a dangerous knife air that flew into the water once more. While that demonic-looking Fong knife air was capable of tearing through the fabric of space, it was unable to touch the white goldfish. The white goldfish was still swimming around slowly. It didn't seem even remotely shaken by Han Sen's attacks, and the few inches of water above it was like the length of an entire solar system. No matter how scary Han Sen's knife air was, it couldn't go through the water to touch the fish inside. This four-sheep cube is so weird, Han Sen thought to himself. He reached out, grabbing the cube and toppling it onto its side. Water began pouring out of the top of the statue. Water burst out like a flooded river, overrunning its banks. The water poured out so quickly that it looked like it was going to form another lake. But the water level within the cube didn't seem like it was being reduced. What is this thing? Han Sen thought, disturbed. The four-sheep cube was far too strange. Not even he could see or understand what it was. If the statue was deified, it was still strange that Han Sen couldn't get a power reading from it. And if it was just an ordinary object, it shouldn't have been able to hold an ocean's worth of water. Han Sen was lost in thought, so he didn't immediately notice that Bauer had climbed to the top of one of the bronze sheep heads. She used her foot to stomp on it. Clearly, Bauer was more than capable of holding a grudge. She remembered each and every time the sheep had mocked her as they fell back into the lake of clouds. So, she wanted to step on the heads of the sheep to unleash the anger she had been harboring all that time. But when she started stomping the head, she heard a catcha-catcha noise. The sheep head had been raised, but it was pushed down by Bauer's furious blows. The sheep head was lowered, as if it was about to take a bite of grass. Bauer was shocked by this, too. She hadn't thought the four-sheep cube was fragile enough to break after being stomped on. Han Sen jerked his head up, immediately noticing the strange scene. The bronze sheep head had been stomped down by Bauer, but the other three heads were still raised. An ominous feeling rolled through Han Sen's stomach. Before, when he struck the statue, he thought it was a very hard object. He had been unable to leave a single mark on the object. Bauer, however, had almost broken one of the heads when she stomped on it twice. If Bauer didn't use some special power to do that, then the cube— Before Han Sen could finish his thought, he saw the swimming goldfish suddenly accelerate. As the two goldfish swam, the water started to splosh and spin until a whirlpool formed. Han Sen realized this was bad. He grabbed Bauer and turned to teleport away. He wanted to get as far away from the four-sheep cube as he could. But after picking up Bauer, he realized he was too late. A powerful force of suction reached out of the cube and grabbed him and Bauer. They fell into the whirlpool and quickly sank. The 16 pigs got pulled in, as well. They were spun around inside the whirlpool alongside Han Sen and Bauer. Han Sen held onto Bauer as he tried to escape, but the world around him had turned into chaos. When he finally managed to regain control of himself and pull himself out of the water, he froze. The four-sheep cube sat quietly beside him, and the two goldfish were once more swimming placidly through the water. The vortex had disappeared, and the sheep head that Bauer had stomped on looked ordinary again. Just like the other three sheep heads, it was raised. Its eyebrows were lowered, and its eyes were half open. It looked as if nothing had happened. The 16 small piggies emerged from the water, too. They lay on the frame of the cube as they shook the water off of their skin. Nothing seemed to have changed, but the environment around them was completely different. Han Sen and the others had been on the shore of Underworld Lake only moments before, but now they were someplace else. As he looked around, Han Sen didn't even think that they were still in outer sky. They were standing near a range of palaces. Unlike the palaces that could be found in outer sky, however, these palaces hadn't been constructed atop mountains. Rather, they were built across the surface of a nearby sea. All kinds of different palaces stood across the seemingly endless sea. They were like islands, spread out across an infinite ocean. This place wasn't anywhere to be found in outer sky. What is this place? Han Sen looked around. Aside from the palaces, there was nothing much to see. There didn't seem to be any living beings around, either. The sea below them looked infinitely deep, but it wasn't like an ordinary sea. The sea wasn't blue. It was transparent like a crystal, and there were no waves. The water looked strangely quiet and still. Dad, the sun is weird. Bauer lifted a finger to point at the sun in the sky. She looked at it with curiosity. Han Sen hadn't noticed the sun, but now that Bauer was pointing her finger at it, he looked and became just as shocked. The sun was releasing light and heat, but it was so weird. Even calling it a sun was something of a misnomer. It was more like a clock in the sky. The clock face held 3 needles, varying in length and thickness, which obviously represented seconds, minutes, and hours. Although there were no numbers on the clock, the position of the needles seemed to be showing that it was 12 o'clock. A palace on a sea of silent water, where the sun is a clock. What kind of place have we come to? Han Sen thought warily. He didn't trust this place. The palaces floated calmly on the surface of the sea, although nothing seemed to be holding them aloft. Even the 4-sheep cube was floating unaided on the surface. Everything around them was so quiet. Since they had arrived, Han Sen hadn't noticed a single sound or movement from their surroundings. The 2 goldfish inside the cube were swimming. They seemed to be playing in the water. As he looked around at the palaces spread across the sea, Han Sen wondered what he should do next. But as he did, he suddenly heard a sound from far away. Dong, 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 dong. In that moment, the air was filled with the sound of tolling bells. Han Sen turned his head up to the sky to get a look at the sun clock. The 3 needles on the sun were pointing to the very top. For a normal clock, that either would mean it was 12 a.m. or 12 p.m.